Chapter 457. There were 4 or 5 standard plates scattered on the wide round table. There were 6 people sitting around the table. In Yushu's eyes, these dishes were really simple. Noble Jean had just sent a servant to bring them over. When I left, my father told me that we would sleep on an empty stomach the night before. With our status in Huajin Garden, it would be hard for us to have a hot meal even if we wanted to. Fortunately, Shuiyuan is here. I propose that we use tea instead of wine to toast her. Cui Yun picked up the teacup in front of her and raised it to Zhan Shuiyuan with a smile. Then she looked around at the others and signaled them to toast with her. Yes, yes to Miss Zhan. Feng Jun and another young man quickly echoed. When Xiao An looked at them and frowned slightly. He also picked up the teacup and placed it on his chest. However, Zhan Shuiyuan pressed the teacup on the table and didn't move. Her eyes fell on Yushu, who didn't move at all. It seemed that she was competing with her patience. If Yushu didn't move, she wouldn't move either. Seeing this, the others all turned their eyes to Yushu. Yushu lazily picked up the cup. Before Zhan Shuiyuan could raise the corner of her mouth, she brought it to her mouth and took a sip. Seeing Zhan Shuiyuan's face turn sour, she laughed inwardly. You want to drink tea from me with just a few dishes? Dream on. Zhan Shuiyuan was a little annoyed with Yushu's behavior of not giving him face. He lightly snorted. Cui Yun looked at this and that. She smiled and picked up the chopsticks to smooth things over. Let's eat quickly. I've been hungry for a long time. Hey, this tofu is really good. Shuiyuan tried first. Zhan Shuiyuan was really hungry. Looking at the food Cui Yun put into her bowl, he then glanced at Yushu, who was slowly drinking tea, and lowered his head to take a sip. Pretending to be enjoying it, he called out to the others, "Oh, although it's not as exquisite as the food at home, there's a special taste in the mountains. Yun, young Master Sun, young Master Wen, young Master Zhou, please eat your chopsticks. Don't wait for the food to get cold. There's no fire in this courtyard, and if you're hungry in the middle of the night, no one will make supper for you." She greeted everyone but left out Yushu. She thought that if Yushu also picked up her chopsticks at this time, people would inevitably look down on her. But if she had the guts to leave, she would have to wait until dawn to starve. What she didn't expect was that Yushu didn't eat the dishes, nor did she leave angrily. Instead, she just sat there casually, refilling her cup after she finished her tea and calmly watched them eat. Being stared at by her like this, it was the few of them who felt uncomfortable eating. Zhan Shuiyuan had never met such a shameless person before. Gritting his teeth, he was about to say something. Gurgle, gurgle. A rhythmic rumble of hunger sounded. Everyone who was eating was stunned. They raised their heads and looked at each other. Finally, they all looked at Yushu strangely. What are they looking at? So what if it's her stomach rumbling? Yushu cursed in her heart. She couldn't maintain her composure. Zhan Shuiyuan sneered and said, "I thought you Swansea wasn't hungry." At this moment, someone came in from outside the door. He's here. Why is he already eating? A few people at the table turned their heads, only to see a eunuch wearing a round crown on his head and embroidered silk armor mumbling to himself as he walked in. Behind him was a young eunuch carrying a food container of myriad treasures. Young masters and young ladies, her ladyship has ordered this servant to bring some food over. The eunuch smiled as he looked at the 6 young people at the table. After recognizing their faces, he called the little eunuch to bring the food container to the table. He opened the lid and took it out layer by layer. At the same time, he announced the names of the dishes: marinated golden eel, crispy sliced goose, 3 delicacies, stewed pig skin, jade tofu pudding, lotus flower cashew nuts, and finally this white spirit fresh fish soup. The various delicacies were placed on a blue and white porcelain plate. There was a pot of soup with a silver spoon and a tray of snow-white steamed buns. The dishes were arranged in a circle around the table. The aroma of the steaming hot food pushed the original 4 dishes and 1 soup to the center. It was a pitiful sight. Gulp. It was unknown how many people swallowed their saliva. Water. Yushu was no exception. She was so hungry that she wanted to scratch the wall. Cui Yun used her elbow to nudge Cui Shuiyuan. She winked at her and said, "Her ladyship really treats you well." She quickly added a few more hot dishes. "How can we finish them?" When that flower-clothed eunuch had entered, he had said, "Nyang nyang," and everyone present had heard it. With Cui Yun's words, they all thought that Zhang Guiran had added more food for them, and their gazes towards Zhan Shuiyuan immediately became a bit warmer. This caused Zhan Shuiyuan, who had been a bit puzzled earlier, to become proud again. She raised her eyes and glanced at Yushu. She smiled and politely said to the eunuch, "I've troubled this eunuch to make this trip. Please help my daughter thank her ladyship for her concern." The eunuch glanced at her and didn't pay her any attention. He took out the silver tin wine jug from the last layer of the food container in the little eunuch's hands. He took out a small plum blossom-shaped wine cup and placed it next to one person. He bent over and kindly said, "This is her ladyship's 100-year-old wine. It clears the heart and moistens the lungs. Miss, you should drink less. Rest early tonight and don't delay tomorrow's official business." Her ladyship? Hearing this, everyone was shocked. Zhang Shuiyuan froze with a smile on his face. He stared at the wine jug next to Yushu. No matter how stupid he was, he understood that she was thinking too much. His face quickly turned red and he wanted to bury his head in his chest in embarrassment. Yushu was stunned for a moment. Her eyes flickered and she understood the whole story. She immediately felt a burst of sourness and sweetness in her heart. In this world, she probably wouldn't be able to find a second considerate person who cared about her so much. Among the 4 consorts in the imperial palace, who else but noble consort Shui could call her noble consort Nyang? She had nothing to do with noble consort Shui at all. If it wasn't for Shui Rui's mediation, how could she have such a big face? "Thank you, her ladyship, for your kindness." Yushu moved her chair and stood up. She cupped her hands towards the eunuch in flowery robes. "I'll see you out." Ignoring the people at the table who had become mute, Yushu saw them out the door. She walked into the courtyard and took the opportunity to ask, "May I know Eunuch Chio's great name?" "I don't dare. Miss, you can just call me Eunuch Chio." "Miss, you don't need to trouble me to see you out. You can go back. This servant has already informed the kitchen that they will send food to you on time tomorrow. You don't need to share a table with others." Yushu thanked him again. She reached into her sleeve and took out the 100 taels banknote that she had prepared for emergencies. She stuffed it into the eunuch's hand. "I'll have to trouble Eunuch Chio to take care of me in the future." Eunuch Chio smiled but didn't refuse. He took the thin banknote. The young eunuch saw it with his sharp eyes and didn't say anything. When they reached the entrance of the courtyard and saw that Yushu had gone back, he asked in a low and puzzled voice, "Master, didn't you say that the biggest taboo for us internal officials is a little chick lying on the doorstep and chattering? Didn't eldest young master already tip her? Why did you still accept her?" Eunuch Chio cast a sidelong glance at him and then stuffed the banknote that hadn't warmed in his hand to his young disciple. He snorted, "You're such an idiot. If I don't accept it, it means that I'm too lazy to deal with this person. If I accept her, it means that she's worth befriending. Take it and give it to your old mother for treatment. Don't say that I didn't take care of you." The young eunuch didn't quite understand, but he silently noted it down. Holding the banknote between his fingers, he glanced at the number on it and grinned. He tucked it away in his bosom, thinking whatever master says is fine. When Yushu returned to the dining room, Zhang Shuiyuan and Cui Yun were nowhere to be seen. They must have been embarrassed by what had just happened and had run back to their rooms. The dishes on the table hadn't been touched. Yushu looked at the 3 youths sitting obediently at the table, waiting for her to return. She generously waved her hand and said, "You're welcome. Let's eat." Other than the expressionless Wen Xiao, and the other 2 sighed in relief. It was only after a whole day that they revealed a friendly smile to Yushu. Because of someone's thoughtfulness, Yushu's appetite increased. She only felt full after eating 2 steamed buns. During the meal, there were inevitably people who tried to ask about her relationship with Imperial Consort Shui. Yushu pretended not to know anything. In the end, she couldn't eat anymore and returned to her room with the pot of wine. After washing her face with water, Yushu took off her coat and lay on the bed. She held a small wine cup in her hand and looked at the crescent moon outside the window. She smiled and squinted her eyes. The mood that had been stifled because of the sudden appearance of the 10th princess, a few days ago, had been soothed by this meal. No matter who Shui Rui used to have in his heart from now on, she would do her best to make him only have her in his heart. At the same time, in the north court of Huajin Garden, in a small building by Lake Li, Qiu Gonggong quietly walked into the middle room. He pushed aside the layers of beaded curtains and bowed his head. He respectfully half-knelt on a carpet and said in a low voice, "Replying to your ladyship, this servant has just delivered the food and the pot of wine." Inside the tent, there was a figure lying on her side. The light reflected on the yellow silk curtains. Her elegant voice was like silk, making people's hearts tremble. "Did you see her?" "I saw her. She's clean and delicate. Her appearance isn't shocking, but she speaks with propriety. She doesn't seem like someone who sticks to formalities. You devil's mind. Did Ben Gong ask you these things?" The servant was too talkative. The voice behind the curtain let out a faint laugh and said, Forget it, I am just curious. Cheng Bai is fine, he asked you to take care of a girl and he did not deliberately hide it from me. I think he has some childish thoughts, that's why he deliberately let me know. Eldest brother passed away a long time ago. Cheng Bai is sensible and much more capable than the other hedonistic sons. His Majesty is willing to put him in an important position. As his aunt, I feel proud. It's a pity that he left his mother at a young age. I only have one son, Xiaojiu, so I love Cheng Bai like a son. Naturally, I have to worry about him. Qiu Gonggong hurriedly said, eldest young master is young and talented, skilled in both the pen and the sword. Which young master in Anling City can compare to him? Only our prince can. Ah, don't try to make me happy. Although Xiaojiu is smart, he isn't as flexible as Cheng Bai. After all, he stayed in the mountains for so many years. Noble consort Xue's thoughts were unknown. She sighed and waved her hand. You can leave. Ask about that girl. We'll talk later. Yes, this servant will leave. Chapter 458. Yushu moved to the room on the east side. Early in the morning, she was woken up by the sunlight shining into the room. She was not unaccustomed to the new environment. Perhaps because she drank some wine last night, she had a good sleep and got out of bed refreshed. There was water in the room that she had a maidservant fetch before going to bed last night. She used it directly to wash up, not expecting anyone to serve her early. First, this wasn't Wangji Tower. Second, there were two delicate young ladies living in the backyard. Those two servants were definitely not enough to order around. Sure enough, when Yushu changed her clothes and strolled around the yard, she saw the two servants bustling in and out of Zhan Shuiyuan's and Chui Yun's rooms. When it was time for breakfast, the little eunuch from last night came again with a food box. There were many kinds of breakfast, but the amount was not as much as last night. It was enough for Yushu to eat alone. Obviously, the people from last night were not included. This was also true. Noble consort Xue's subordinates took care of Yushu because of Xue Rue. There was no need to involve the young ladies and young masters. However, Yushu suspected that it was also because eunuch Qiu didn't know what was good for Zhan Shuiyuan and the others last night. Only breakfast was prepared for her, so Yushu ate in her room. She wasn't as childish as Zhan Shuiyuan, showing off a few mouthfuls of food in front of others. She wasn't afraid of others secretly saying that she was giving preferential treatment. Yushu leisurely finished her breakfast and went to the door to call for a maid who was free to come in. She asked her to wash the bowls and chopsticks and wait for someone to deliver the food at noon. She also asked, has everyone else eaten breakfast? However, the answer was somewhat beyond Yushu's expectations. They were still hungry. Yushu folded her handkerchief and wiped her mouth. Looking at the rising sun outside, she shook her head and sighed. Noble consort Zhan was still not as powerful as noble consort Xue. At 7:15 in the morning, official Wang of the Ministry of Rites came to find them with two people carrying a large box. He gathered the 6 people in the empty front yard. Yushu watched as he asked someone to open the box. There were several bronze tools of different shapes inside and she could tell that they were heavy. Today I'll teach you how to identify and retrieve weapons. I'm sure you're all familiar with the etiquette that was passed down earlier. These 6 weapons were passed down by the sacred ancestor, since Lord Wang gave a long speech, mainly explaining that the mission of the 6 of them during the sacred ancestor day of sacrifice ceremony was to protect the 6 artifacts and follow the sacred ancestor closely to worship the ancestors. These 6 bronze artifacts were a book, a sword, a ruler, a cauldron, a rui scepter, and the 8 trigrams. They respectively represented Emperor Anwu's achievements in pacifying the 9 prefectures and governing the world. It was just right for the 6 of them to take 1 weapon each. However, according to the rules of etiquette, women should not use sharp weapons and men should not be weak. Therefore, Lord Wang assigned Wen Xiao and the other 2 teenagers to take the sword, the tripod, and the ruler. The rest were left with the book, the rui, and the 8 trigrams. Looking at the remaining 3 bronze artifacts without waiting for Lord Wang to make arrangements, Zhan Shuiyuan spoke first. I'll take the rui scepter, Yunyun takes the 8 trigrams plate, and Yu Xuanzi takes the bronze book. How about that? Chui Yun quickly nodded and said, let's do it this way. Among the 6 artifacts, if one were to compare the level of metaphor, the tripod would naturally be the best, followed by the rui scepter. The 8 trigrams plate was, of course, the symbol of the E-Masters. The 2 of them did not decline modestly and directly picked the best one. Lord Wang turned to look at Yushu. Seeing that she didn't have any objections, he nodded and told the assistant officer behind him to record it down. He told them, these 6 artifacts are fake. They are for you to practice using. Wait until the 9th day of the 5th lunar month, then you will hold the real artifacts. Zhang Shuiyuan and Cui Yun happily went forward to hold the bronze artifacts. Yushu picked up the bronze book indifferently. She weighed it in her hand and found that it was about the same weight as she had imagined. She then looked at the Rui scepter and the 8 trigrams in the other 2 girls' hands, and the corners of her mouth immediately curled up. After that, Lord Wang didn't ask them to do anything else. After teaching them the basic hand gestures, he set up an incense burner and moved a chair to the side to keep time for them. He asked them to stand in a line for the time it takes to burn a stick of incense. The young people didn't care and looked relaxed. At the beginning, they all held the hand gestures and stood in a more standard position. However, before Lord Wang could drink a second cup of tea, someone started shaking the incense burner. Lord Wang saw this and frowned secretly. He didn't know that among the 6 people, 5 of them hadn't eaten or drunk anything that morning. Wen Xiao, En and the other 2 teenagers were fine. They had stayed to freeload on Yushu last night so they could bear it in the morning on an empty stomach. However, Zhang Shuiyuan, who was angry last night and didn't eat, and Cui Yun, who comforted her for the whole night, suffered. The 2 girls hadn't been able to eat their fill after traveling for a whole day yesterday. Moreover, because of their resentment towards Yushu, they had chatted for half the night. They were tired and hungry. How long could they stand with a copper lump in their hands? What's more, compared with the thin bronze book in Yushu's hand, the Rui scepter and the 8 trigram plate were much heavier. Yushu calmly looked at Zhang Shuiyuan, who was standing on her left. Zhang Shuiyuan's face was pale and his forehead was sweating. She took pleasure in his misfortune and thought, the person who seems to be at a disadvantage may not necessarily be the one who gets the advantage. After a while, Zhang Shuiyuan couldn't stand it anymore. She staggered forward and half squatted down. The bronze artifact in her hand fell to the ground. Shuiyuan, Cui Yun took the opportunity to put down her sore arm and went forward to help her. Ahem. Lord Wang coughed heavily and stood up unhappily. He said seriously, how long have you been standing? Didn't you eat this morning? It had to be said that Lord Wang was telling the truth. Zhang Shuiyuan felt embarrassed and wanted to say that they really didn't eat, but she saw Yushu's figure from the corner of her eyes and swallowed her words. She thought that if Yushu heard what she said, it would prove that no one brought her breakfast this morning. Thinking of the embarrassing scene at the dining table last night, she bit her lips, feeling wronged and resentful. To fight back, she rubbed her arm and pushed away Cui Yun's support. She held the Rui scepter and stood up again. Yushu raised her eyebrows and thought, at least you have some backbone. They stood like this for half an hour. Except for Yushu and Wen Xiao, and even the 2 boys couldn't stand it and put down their utensils twice, let alone Zhang Shuiyuan and Cui Yun. They almost had to rest after standing for a while. Lord Wang didn't look good. This was related to the ancestral worship ceremony, so he couldn't afford to be careless. Usually he had to be polite to these young ladies, but now he didn't have to worry. He first nodded to Yushu and Wen Xiao, and then coldly said a few words to the other 4. However, before he finished, Zhang Shuiyuan, who was embarrassed and tired, covered her stomach with cold sweat and bent down. Ouch! Seeing this, Lord Wang stopped talking and hurriedly asked someone to help her back to her room. Sun Jun and another young man took the opportunity to follow them, so that they wouldn't be scolded again. Chapter 459. Lord Wang's sigh was understandable to Yushu, as someone who had once longed to enter the Taisha Library. The E Academy, which was known as the #1 academy in the world, actually relied on one's family background. That's right, it was family background. On the surface, the Taisha Library, which accepted students every 3 years, selected the best based on the rankings of the Grand Yen examination. But in reality, those who did not have the background of a noble family, lacked the guidance of a famous teacher, and had to rely on their own to figure out their way and achieve results in the Grand Yen examination were all not young. And the other rule of the Taisha Library was that they only accepted young talents. This was another dignified excuse. The noble families of the E Academy never lacked children. They had a group of masters to guide them, and even those who were not talents could be taught to become talents. It was not difficult for them to pass the Grand Yen examination. There were 12 noble families in the capital alone, not to mention those outside the capital. The Taisha Library only accepted a dozen or so people every 3 years, and almost all the places were taken by the children of noble families. How many dark horses, like Yushu, could there be? And how many geniuses had been killed in the cradle in the past 100 years? There were many young people in the Taisha Library, but they were limited to the small circle of noble families. Even the 18 academicians in charge of teaching were all from noble families. Of course, Jing Chen was an exception. His background was more powerful than that of a normal noble family. He was the emperor himself. It seemed like there was a constant influx of new blood, but what was not visible was the serious exclusion. Under this kind of atmosphere, it could only result in a situation where each generation was worse than the previous one. It was precisely because of what she saw today that Lord Wang sighed. Yushu did not know which ancestor had proposed the rule of regardless of age only rank in the Taisha library, but she guessed that the ancestor would not want to see the sealed Taisha library. Unfortunately, Yushu could almost foresee that in the near future, this rule that she admired would probably be useless. This was the so-called when one flourishes, one must fall. Yushu looked at the sorrowful and helpless Lord Wang, and suddenly realized that the generation she had come to had not only witnessed the prosperity of the E Academy, but also a decline? Complementary operator? Complementary operator? Lord Wang called Yushu a few times to bring her back to reality. Seeing her absent-minded look, he mistakenly thought that she was also exhausted, so he frowned and said, "Do you have any discomfort anywhere?" Yushu flashed a toothy grin and said, "No, I'm fine. It won't be a problem for me to stand for a whole morning." Lord Wang heaved a sigh of relief when he heard her confident reply. He thought to himself that these two were the only ones who could handle the situation. If there was another one who couldn't handle the situation, he would definitely cry. Lord Wang turned around and asked Wen Shaoan, who looked thin and weak. The answer he got was almost the same. "Don't worry, sir. I can stand for a whole day." Well, this one was even more straightforward than Yushu. Lord Wang was so touched that he wanted to cry. He nodded and had them put down the utensils in their hands. He pointed at the bronze utensils that had been left behind by a few people and said, "In that case, Yu Xuanzi will take the 8 trigrams plate and young Master Wen will take the sword." Yu Shu and Wen Shaoan looked at each other and didn't understand what he meant. Didn't they choose it before? Why did they change it again? Lord Wang quickly explained to them, when the Holy Ancestor established the Da and Kingdom, he used a Chunjun sword to command the 6 armies. Empress Ningxin received the mandate of heaven and used the Book of Changes passed down by the goddess of 9th heaven to assist the Holy Ancestor. Therefore, the sword and the 8 diagrams are the most important of the 6 utensils. They were too weak and were afraid that they would make a mistake that day, so you two took it and walked in front. Hearing the reason, Yushu couldn't help but laugh. This was called an unintentional willow. When Shaoan continued to ask, but it was clearly written in the ritual that among the 6 utensils, the tripod was the first, followed by the Rui scepter. Don't you want us to memorize it by heart? Being questioned, Lord Wang smiled and said seriously, "I want you to memorize it by heart, but I didn't ask you to memorize it by heart. The ritual has its own rules. This is the sacrifice day of the Holy Ancestor, so we naturally have to follow the instructions of the ancestors." Whether Wen Shaoan noticed it or not, Yushu felt that Lord Wang deliberately didn't explain it to them at the beginning. However, the sacrifice day was held once a year. Some students from Taisha Library had even participated in it 3 times, so they should have noticed it. But looking at Zhang Shuiyuan's appearance today, it was obvious that he didn't know it, so he chose the Rui scepter. What did this mean? Yushu thought about it and could only say that the Zhan family of Jiangxi was a local tyrant. In the capital city, they still had to listen to the 12 families. It wasn't until noon that the internal official in charge of the kitchen seemed to remember the people living in the side courtyard and finally sent food over. It was a simple 3 dishes, a soup and steamed buns. When it was sent over, there was no heat. Fortunately, it was summer, so they didn't have to worry about being hungry. Putting aside the fact that Yushu was giving them special attention in the room, Lord Wang came again in the afternoon. Zhang Shuiyuan and the others had eaten their fill and finally had some energy. However, before they could do anything, they were rearranged to hold the utensils and were told that the 6 people would be led by Yushu and Wen Shaoan. Naturally, some people were dissatisfied, but they were dismissed by Lord Wang. "What utensils do you want to hold? Stand under the sun for an hour and I will agree." "Then why don't the 2 of them stand?" The person who pointed at Yushu and Wen Shaoan was Cui Yun, who had received the 8 trigrams plate in the morning. At this moment she was a little resentful. She must be regretting hiding in the room to accompany Zhang Shuiyuan in the morning and wasting the opportunity. That's right. Everyone has to stand. Why don't they stand? Zhang Shuiyuan was also dissatisfied and immediately called the other 2 to agree. Yushu looked up at the sky. Wen Shaoan was expressionless. Lord Wang sneered and said, "When you ran back to your room to rest in the morning, the 2 of them stood for more than an hour. This time no one had any objections. They arrived at Huajin Garden on the 6th day of the new year. After the 7th day, on the morning of the 8th day, Lord Wang brought the ceremonial robes for the ceremony. There were also a few palace maids accompanying them. They went into the rooms to teach them how to put on their hats and clothes. The styles of the men's and women's ceremonial robes were different. The 3 youths were wearing crooked robes, while the women's dress was a plain long dress with 3 layers of snow-white undergarments. Only a tall and thin person like Yu Shu could show off her waist in the dress. The other 2 girls were equally dressed. After changing into the formal clothes, Lord Wang checked them one by one. When he was satisfied, he waved his hand and ordered them to follow him. With a palace maid leading the way, they followed behind to learn the steps and posture. Huajin Garden was huge. Pavilions and terraces could be seen everywhere. After leaving the side courtyard, they crossed a small bridge. In the distance, they saw a group of nobles in the garden. Some of the 6 youths were tempted to make a move, but Lord Wang acted as if he didn't see it and continued walking. He had no intention of leading them to climb up. In the distance, in a pavilion, someone was looking at the group of people. Imperial brother, look over there. Why are they dressed like that? Are they patrolling the garden? He pointed to a little girl in the distance. She had a palace gauze on her shoulders and a partridge flower hairpin on her head. She was about 11 or 12 years old. From her voice, one could tell that she was a member of the royal family. Lu Tan, who was arranging the chess pieces, turned his head and took a look. With a normal expression he said, "Oh, that should be a student of the Taisha library." After saying that, he turned back and saw the man who was playing chess with him. The man held a chess piece in his hand and didn't place it. He was also looking at the bridge. "Cousin, it's your turn." Shui Rui came back to his senses and smiled at Lu Tan. He placed the chess piece in his hand and didn't say anything. The little princess saw that they were playing chess and didn't play with her. She pouted and looked around in boredom. After a while, she lifted her dress and walked to the side. When they weren't paying attention, she slipped down the pavilion and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The 12th princess ran away. Shui Rui raised his hand and started eating the black chess pieces on the plate. Lu Tan was thinking about his next move. Without turning his head, he said, "Huajin Garden is guarded by the Yulin royal guards. We can't lose her. Let her play. It's rare for her to leave the palace." Then he changed the topic and asked, "Is Miss Lianfang here for this year's ceremony?" Shui Rui said, "She was not selected. Later, Miss Qin fell and got injured, so she was replaced." Lu Tan smiled coldly. "The Taisha library." Shui Rui didn't comment. He watched him move a chess piece. He nodded and said, "Good move." Lord Wang took Yu Shu and the others to walk around Huajin Garden. They went to all the places they could go before letting them go. Tomorrow was the 9th day of the new year. The ceremony was at noon. However, they had to rush to the Imperial Mausoleum early in the morning. There was no room for mistakes. Lord Wang reminded them again and again, especially to have them rest early tonight. When he said this, he especially stared at Zhang Shuiyuan and Cui Yun, hinting at something. After Lord Wang left, Yu Shu returned to her room to change out of her gown and put it away in the wardrobe. It was still early and she didn't bring any books with her on this trip. Now that she had nothing to do, she hid in her room and felt bored. Knock knock. Someone knocked on the door. "You Swansea." Yu Shu recognized Cui Yun's voice. She came out of her bedroom and opened the door. She saw Cui Yun standing outside with a smile and holding Zhang Shuiyuan's hand. "What's the matter?" "It's still early to eat. We are going to walk around the garden. Do you want to come with us?" "I'm tired. You guys go ahead." After Yu Shu finished speaking, she closed the door. She would rather stay in the room and be bored than deal with this kind of villain. Zhang Shuiyuan looked at the closed door and said to Cui Yun with a gloomy expression, "I told you not to call her. You are meddlesome. If you want to curry favor with her, go ahead. Why bring me along?" Cui Yun hurriedly held her arm and whispered, "What are you talking about? Why should I curry favor with her? Is it worth it? I don't want to see you become enemies with her. She is a 4th-class female fortune-teller. When we get back to the library, if she comes looking for trouble, I want to see what you will do." Zhang Shuiyuan couldn't be provoked. She gritted her teeth and said, "Do you think I'm afraid of her?" Fine. You are not afraid of her. Let's go. Let's go somewhere else. Don't let her spoil your mood." Cui Yun pulled Zhang Shuiyuan away. Behind the door, Yu Shu listened to their quarrel. She frowned and went back to her bedroom. It was not that she had a good temper and did not want to go out and argue with them. It was really difficult for her to pay attention to such mindless characters. Zhang Shuiyuan and Cui Yun said that they were going to the garden. However, Huajin Garden was not a place where they could casually walk around. There were guards guarding the garden. They didn't go far before they were blocked. After a few times they lost interest and walked around the lake for a while before heading back. Cui Yun followed Zhang Shuiyuan back to her room. Seeing that she was depressed, she coaxed, "There is nothing fun in Huajin Garden. When we return to the capital, I will take you to a better place. I'm sure you will like it." And Zhang Shuiyuan nodded. She touched her neck. The next moment her expression suddenly changed. Bored people were the easiest to get sleepy. Yushu and Yi lay on the bed and unknowingly fell asleep. When they woke up again, they were woken up by the sound of knocking on the door. Bang bang bang. "Come out. Yushu, come out." Yushu yawned and sat up. The room was dusky. She tidied her hair and was unhappy to be woken up like this. She went to open the door with a gloomy face. "What's with the noise? 1, 2, 3, 4. There was more than one person standing outside the door. The first person was Zhang Shuiyuan. When Yushu saw her angrily push her away, she rushed into her bedroom without saying a word. Yushu was stunned. She followed closely and saw Zhang Shuiyuan pull the pillow and quilt on her bed to the floor. She stepped on it like a headless fly and turned to pull at her wardrobe. Yushu strode forward and grabbed her hand. She used force to pull her away and shouted, "Are you crazy? Let me go. You little thief." Zhang Shuiyuan shook off her hand and pointed at Yushu's nose. She scolded with red eyes, "You stole my Tianyu. Stop pretending. Give it back to me." Yushu suddenly felt a headache. She pulled her hard, pinched her wrist and asked coldly, "Which eye of yours saw me steal your things, huh?" Zhang Shuiyuan felt pain. She shrank her shoulders and said fiercely, "Who else could it be except you? I went out with Yun Yun in the afternoon and you were alone in the backyard. You must have been greedy for my Tianyu and sneaked into my room to take it." Yushu almost spat on her face. She was a brainless fool. She was not a member of the Zhan family and didn't know Tianyu feng shui. What was the use of taking her broken stone? Did she want to use it to break the glass of her house? Cui Yun, Feng Jun and Wen Xiaoan, who came to watch, saw this scene and hesitated. They didn't know whether they should go forward to persuade her or not. Cui Yun couldn't stand it anymore. She said bitterly, "You Swansea, if you took Shuyuan's Tianyu, give it back to her. Don't wait for things to get worse." Zhang Shuyuan suddenly turned around and shouted, "Yun, go and ask Lord Wang to come here. Go and find the guards. Tell them there is a thief here. Go." Cui Yun hesitated and took 2 steps back. She turned around and was about to run out to call the guards. Yushu saw this and felt her teeth itching. Idiots. A group of idiots. Didn't they know where they were? If they really alarmed the higher-ups, they would be in big trouble. Wen Xiaoan stop her. Would Wen Xiaoan, who had been keeping a distance from Yushu these days, listen to her? The answer was proved by his actions. "Ah, you let go of me." Cui Yun screamed and tried to hit Wen Xiaoan's arm, but Wen Xiaoan didn't budge at all. He didn't let her move a single step away. The other 2 youths looked at her and didn't know whether to help or pull her back. They just stood there blankly. At this time the room was in chaos. "Don't pull me. It hurts. Let go of me. Help. Help. Yushu, you little thief. You damn thief. How dare you steal my Tianyu? You have a guilty conscience. You are despicable and shameless." Yushu took a deep breath. She couldn't bear it anymore. She raised her hand and slapped Zhang Shuiyuan's head. Zhang Shuiyuan was knocked to the side and said angrily. Chapter 460. Yushu slaps Zhang Shuiyuan, who is shouting, and the others are also stunned and don't know what to do. "What are you shouting for? Who dares to say one more word? If the nobles in the garden hear you, I want to see who will have a good ending." Yushu takes the opportunity to scare them and calm them down. Then she asks Wen Xiaoan to go out quietly to find Lord Wang and tell him not to disturb others. As soon as Wen Xiaoan leaves, Zhang Shuiyuan starts to cry. Yushu raises her hand without saying anything, which makes her behave. She just holds her face and sobs in a low voice, as if she has been greatly wronged. As the saying goes, a bitch will be tortured by a wicked person. She doesn't listen to Yushu and is even more domineering than her, so she doesn't dare to say anything. Not long after Wen Xiaoan leaves, he comes back with Lord Wang, who is out of breath. Lord Wang has heard about what happened from Wen Xiaoan on the way. As soon as he enters Yushu's room, he closes the door with a sullen face. He calls all the people in the bedroom to the living room and reprimands them in a low voice. "Do you all want to die? Where is this place? Tomorrow is a special day. How dare you make trouble here?" Cui Yin says timidly, "Lord Wang, we didn't mean to. Shuiyuan's Tianyu was stolen." Yushu snorts coldly. Lord Wang glances at Yushu. Seeing that she doesn't speak, he turns his eyes to Zhang Shuiyuan, who is covering her head and crying, and asks, "What Tianyu? When did you lose it?" Lord Wang is an official of the Ministry of Rites, not a teacher, so he doesn't know much about Jiangxi Fengshui Zhan family. Zhang Shuiyuan thinks that Lord Wang is going to stand up for her, so she becomes bold. She rubs her eyes and stops crying. She first explains the rarity of their family's Tianyu, and finally points at Yushu and says, "I was wearing it in the morning and left it in the room in the afternoon. When I came back it was gone. I couldn't find it anywhere. It must have been stolen by her." Yushu denies it before Lord Wang asks, "It's not me. I was sleeping in the afternoon and didn't go to her room." "It's you, and you still don't want to admit it." "I didn't do it. Why should I admit it?" "Then do you dare to let me search your room? Who do you think you are to search just because you said so? You have a guilty conscience, you." Lord Wang felt a headache when he saw them quarreling. He immediately said in a low voice, "Enough. Don't make any more noise. If anyone says another word, they can forget about attending tomorrow's ceremony. Pack up and leave tonight." Zhang Shuiyuan angrily shut his mouth, and the room became quiet. Official Wang looked at this and then at that, not knowing what to do. It was true that he was in charge of these 6 people, but he was a ceremonial official, not an inquisitor. How could he judge right from wrong, and he had no right to search the body of an oracle? Yushu saw Lord Wang's difficult expression and frowned inwardly. She knew that this matter couldn't be resolved peacefully. With the muddle-headed behavior of Zhang Shuiyuan and the others, this matter would definitely blow up. Unfortunately, no one was listening to her. Her identity as the fortune teller did not carry much weight here, so she could not make any decisions. At this time there was another knock on the door. "Miss Yu, this servant is here to deliver dinner." It was the little eunuch Xiajizi. Yushu moved and walked over to open the door a crack. She looked at the little eunuch outside and had an idea. She didn't hurry to take the food box in his hands. Instead she asked, "Eunuch Xiajizi, where is your master?" After 2 days of delivering food, Yushu was aware of the relationship between this little eunuch and the senior eunuch, Qiu Tongren, who served noble consort Shui. Xiajizi saw that Yushu was blocking the door, so he stood outside and didn't enter. When he heard her ask about his master, he said, "Master is serving Her Highness." "What's the matter, miss?" Yushu was speechless. She wanted to find Shui Rui to deal with this matter, but she didn't know where he was. Only eunuchs with special status could come and go as they pleased in Huajin Garden. She thought that Qiu Tongren would know where Shui Rui was, but eunuch Qiu was serving noble consort Shui, so it would be difficult. Xiajizi was clever. He looked at her and carefully asked, "Miss, if you have something to say, this servant might be able to help." Yushu asked with a trace of hope, "Do you know where eldest young Master Shui is in the garden?" "I know, eldest young Master Shui lives in the south courtyard." Yushu was delighted and quickly said, "Then I'll have to trouble you to ask eldest young Master Shui to come here. Tell him that I have an urgent matter to discuss with him." Xiajizi remembered that he had received 100 taels from Yushu from his master the day before yesterday, so he was willing to help her run errands. Thus, he readily agreed and gave the food box to Yushu before he ran off to find Shui Rui. Yushu closed the door and returned. Seeing a group of people in the living room looking at her, she said to Lord Wang, "Lord, please wait for a moment. I've already sent someone to inform Lord Shui, the junior minister of the Supreme Court. Let's wait for him to arrive before we discuss the matter." Lord Wang had heard of Shui Rui's reputation before. His expression had relaxed, but Zhang Shuiyuan was still staring at Yushu with a face full of suspicion. Cui Yun, who was standing at the side, pulled Yushu back and remained silent. Yushu was too lazy to explain in front of them. She brought the food in the food box to the table and politely asked Lord Wang about it. Seeing that he shook his head and refused, she called out to Wen Shaoan and gave him a pair of serving chopsticks. The two ignored everyone else and sat at the table to eat. When Zhang Shuiyuan saw Yushu acting like this, he became even angrier. Earlier, his head had hurt from being hit by her. Now that he was angry, he felt dizzy. Cui Yun helped him to sit on a chair. When he thought of the lost Tianyu, tears fell from his eyes again in a daze. Shui Rui came faster than Yushu expected. She had just put down her chopsticks to wipe her mouth when she heard a knock on the door. It was Xiajizi again. "Miss Yu, I've invited eldest young master." Everyone in the room, who had been silent, suddenly had a change of expression. Yushu hurriedly went to open the door. It was already dark outside, but she still saw Shui Rui, who was wearing a bamboo green robe, standing behind Xiajizi. When their eyes met, she could see the worry in his eyes. "What happened?" Shui Rui wasn't in a hurry to go inside. Instead, he used his height to look over Yu Shu's head to see the situation in the room. He guessed and asked her. Yu Shu briefly told him, "You've heard of Jiangxi's Zhan family's Tianyu geomancy, right? The Tianyu that Miss Zhan carried with her was lost. She suspected that I stole it, so she set it up. Official Wang from the Ministry of Rites is also there." Needless to say, Shui Rui knew why Yu Shu had asked him to come. He nodded and followed her into the living room. He didn't care that Xiajizi was poking his head around outside and didn't leave. Official Wang went forward to greet Shui Rui. In terms of official rank, Shui Rui was half a rank higher than him. Most of the young people in the room recognized who Shui Rui was. Those who were originally sitting there all stood up to avoid being rude. Shui Rui didn't exchange greetings with official Wang. He walked to the chair at the head of the table and sat down. He looked around at the expressions of the people in the room and asked first, "Who lost it?" Zhan Shuiyuan hurriedly said, "It's me. My Tianyu was stolen." "How can you be sure that someone stole it and you didn't lose it yourself?" I. Zhan Shuiyuan stuttered because of Shui Rui's question. Cui Yun, who was supporting her, spoke quickly and helped her. "It's like this, Your Excellency. Zhan Shuiyuan's Tianyu never left her. She was still wearing it this morning. In the afternoon, official Wang brought a dress for us to try on. Because it exposed her neck, the palace maid sister asked her to take it off. She kept it in the room and forgot to wear it. We walked in the garden in the afternoon, and when we came back, the Tianyu was gone." Cui Yun didn't point out that Yu Shu did it, but Zhan Shuiyuan immediately found her confidence. She said to Shui Rui confidently, "In the afternoon, only Yu Swanzi stayed in the backyard alone. We all went out. I'm sure that she entered my room and stole my Tianyu. On the first day when we lived in Huajin Garden, she asked me about it and borrowed my Tianyu. She must have been greedy at that time." In the afternoon, when official Wang took us to learn how to walk, she saw the Tianyu above my neck and stole it when I was not in the room. Yu Shu said bluntly, "Are you kidding me? Why would I stare at your neck? I'm not interested in women." Puff. A muffled laugh sounded at the wrong time. Everyone turned around. Feng Jun covered his mouth awkwardly and lowered his head. Zhan Shuiyuan's face turned red and white. She clenched her fists and was about to argue with Yu Shu, but she was interrupted. "Take me to your room." Shui Rui stood up and gestured for Zhan Shuiyuan to go out. When they reached the door, he took the lantern from Xiaoji's hand and the others followed him. Zhan Shuiyuan's room was next to Yu Shu's. It was in the middle of the 3 rooms in the backyard. The door was not closed, so Shui Rui pushed it open. He raised the lantern to illuminate the room. The room was a little messy. It could be seen that the owner had lost something and was anxiously searching for it. Shui Rui asked them to stay outside the door and walked around alone. After a while, he came out and lit the candles in the room. He walked to the door with the lantern, looked down at the feet of everyone and led them back to Yu Shu's room. He also walked around the room and came out again. He asked Zhan Shuiyuan, "After you took off the Tianyu, where did you put it?" "I put it under the pillow." "Are you sure? Did you remember wrongly?" Zhan Shuiyuan pulled Cui Yun anxiously and said, "I can't remember wrongly. Yin also saw it. You can ask her if you don't believe me." Shui Rui nodded and turned his dark eyes to Cui Yun. "Did you see it?" Cui Yun was stunned by his stare. She pursed her lips and said, "Yes." "All right, then take it out." Shui Rui spoke with a calm expression. Cui Yun was stunned. Not only her, but everyone present was stunned when they heard Shui Rui's words. Yu Shu was the first to react. She looked at Shui Rui and then at Cui Yun. She suddenly sneered and said, "It turns out that you are trying to frame me." Cui Yun hurriedly refuted with a pale face, "What are you talking about? Are you suspecting that I stole Shui Yuan's Tianyu? How is that possible? It's not me. I've been with her all the time. How could I have the chance to sneak into her room?" Zhan Shuiyuan also didn't believe it. He angrily said to Shui Rui, "Why do you like to wrongly accuse people? You did the same thing at the observatory. You casually said that academician Jing killed someone, and now you are wrongly accusing Yun Yun. What kind of official are you? You are not fair at all. Don't say anything. I'm sure it's not her. Yu Shu. If you don't believe me, let me go and search." When she heard this, Shui Rui hadn't said anything, yet Yu Shu was the first to become displeased. She could tolerate these idiots slandering her, yet she couldn't bear to hear anyone speak ill of Shui Rui. So she turned around and glared at Zhan Shuiyuan before she narrowed her eyes and said. Chapter 461. 1 minute. "If I can prove that I didn't steal it, then you'll let me slap you 10 times? Anyone who was wrongly accused as a thief would not be happy. Zhang Shuiyuan kept pestering endlessly, which made Yu Shu impatient. If it were any other time, she would definitely teach her a lesson. However, the overall situation was more important, so she asked someone to find Shui Rui to solve the problem. Who knew that Zhang Shuiyuan, who had lost the Heaven Jade, would bite people like a mad dog whose tail had been stepped on. She even blamed Shui Rui. Yu Shu lost her patience and made up her mind to make Zhang Shuiyuan bear the consequences. Zhang Shuiyuan had a strong temper. Under Yu Shu's provocative gaze, she pushed away Cui Yun, who was trying to dissuade her in a low voice. She gritted her teeth and actually challenged Yu Shu. If you want to prove that you stole it, do you dare to kneel down and apologize to me? Shui Rui frowned and his face darkened. Before he could say anything, he heard Yu Shu agree readily, "Why not? We'll do it." Then she said to everyone present, "You all heard it. Be my witness. Miss Zhang personally promised me to slap her." Zhang Shuiyuan trembled with anger. In her opinion, Yu Shu, who was very interested in her Heaven Jade on the first day she moved into Huajin Garden, must have been greedy, so she took the opportunity to steal her treasure. Otherwise, why would Yu Shu stop people from searching her room? She must have thought that she didn't dare to make a big deal out of the ancestral worship ceremony, so she wanted to hide for a while and take the Heaven Jade for herself. If she had tolerated it, maybe Yu Shu would hide her Heaven Jade somewhere else, and it would be difficult to find it again. As a direct descendant of the Zhan family, the Heaven Jade was no different from a lifeblood to Zhang Shuiyuan. Without the Heaven Jade, it was impossible for the family to give her a second piece. Without the Heaven Jade Feng Shui Sutra, half of her life would be ruined. Knowing the pros and cons, how could she not be anxious and terrified? Regardless of how big of a commotion she made, she had to get the Heaven Jade back. Alright, if you want to prove that you didn't steal it, then let me search your room and body right now. Yu Shu sneered and said, "I said I wanted to prove that I didn't steal your stupid stone, but I didn't agree to let you search me." "What, you want to deny it?" Clear Snow said anxiously. "Who's going to deny it?" "I'm still waiting to slap your face," Yu Shu teased. She pointed at Shui Rui, who was standing behind the door as if it was a matter of course. "With the junior minister of the Supreme Court, Lord Shui, here, I'll let him make the decision. I think he will definitely give a convincing answer as to who is right and who is wrong between you and me." With these words, she threw the ball to Shui Rui. Not mentioning what others thought, Shui Rui, who had just been a bit angry, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Looking at Yu Shu's cunning eyes, listening to her words that were filled with trust, his heart itched, and he really wanted to grab her in his hands and rub it. Yu Shu's actions had to be said to have won his heart. He liked her stubbornness, but as a man, he hoped that the woman he admired would be able to trust him. Since that was the case, he naturally wouldn't waste Yu Shu's trust. Shui Rui turned to look at Zhang Shuiyuan, who had an unconvinced expression, and reprimanded coldly, "I am the judge of the Supreme Court. With the official seal, I have the right to interrogate officials and scholars below the 6th rank and 5th rank. I can act first and report later. What rank are you? How dare you question me?" Shui Rui was young and successful. He was born in a family of generals and ministers. He worked in the Supreme Court and received orders from the emperor. All he saw were murder cases and capital punishment. His official prestige was much stronger than those civil officials who had been officials for many years. If he really put on airs, all the people present, including Lord Wang of the Ministry of Rights, were not enough. Being stared at by him, Zhang Shuiyuan panicked. He lowered his head and said with grievance, "Even if you are an official of the imperial court, you can't fabricate facts and be biased. You don't need to say it. I will judge it myself." Lord Wang coughed slightly and came out to smooth things over. "Lord Shui, let's find out the truth as soon as possible, so as not to disturb the superiors." Shui Rui nodded and exchanged glances with Yu Shu. Seeing her secretly winking at him, he revealed a smile at the corner of his mouth. Then he put on a serious face again. His gaze swept over the others and finally fell on Wen Xiao. He asked a seemingly unimportant question. "Did the 6 of you walk in the garden in the afternoon?" Wen Xiao and saw Shui Rui looking at him. He hesitated for a moment before answering, "Yes, Lord Wang asked us to change into formal attire and practice our gait in the garden." Shui Rui asked Lord Wang again, "Did you pass by the south garden?" To avoid disturbing the nobles, Huajin Garden usually did not allow people to enter freely, especially the north and south gardens. Lord Wang hurriedly explained, "Yes, we did pass by the south garden, but I did not bring them in randomly. Instead, we walked by the treading swallow bridge." "Yes, I was in the pavilion in the garden at the time and saw you," Shui Rui said casually. There is a newly dug flower pond under the treading swallow bridge. Because it is filled with water, it is not easy to walk, right? Lord Wang continued, yes, we could not go around it. I could only have them carry their clothes, but they still stepped in a lot of mud. Hearing this, Shui Rui smiled and lowered the lantern in his hand. Pointing at their feet, he said, then let's look at your shoes. Everyone lowered their heads and looked at their shoes, then at the people beside them. 7 people, 7 pairs of feet, all somewhat dirty. Not a single person's shoes were clean. There was nothing special? What does Lord Shui mean by this? Lord Wang asked in puzzlement. Shui Rui did not say anything. He brought them back to the door of Zhang Shuiyuan's room and pushed open the door that he had previously closed. The candles in the room were bright. It was not as clear as it was during the day, but it did not obstruct people's vision. Before they could see anything, Shui Rui had already pointed it out. Look at the floor, aren't there some dirty and messy footprints? She was not the only one who had entered Zhang Shuiyuan's room. In addition, she had tossed Tianyu and searched everywhere, so it was not strange for there to be some footprints on the wooden floor. However, there were a few sets of footprints that were stained with some brownish-yellow mud. They were different from the blurry footprints at the side and were especially obvious. Holding the lantern, Shui Rui looked at their expressions and said slowly, there were some clouds in the afternoon and the sun did not come out. You walked over Swallow Trampling Bridge and returned here not far. The mud on your shoes was not dry, so when you stepped on the wooden floor of the room, you left marks. I heard from you, Swansea, that not long after Miss Zhang and Miss Chui returned, they invited her to tour the garden together. She rejected them and then she took a nap in her room. It was only 2 or 3/4 of an hour before Miss Zhang and Miss Chui came back and found that Tianyu was missing, so they complained to you, Swansea. Am I right? The few of them nodded in agreement. When Xiao and pondered for a moment and said, I don't know when Miss Zhang and Miss Chui went out, but I saw them coming back from outside. The 6 of us came back from outside at 5:15 in the evening, but the 2 of them came back at 5:30 in the evening. When Xiao An's words confirmed Shui Rui's words. Zhang Shuiyuan and Chui Yun went out alone and came back not long after. Hearing this, Yu Shu already understood. Looking at the footprints in the room, she couldn't help but show a trace of mockery on her face. And Shui Rui didn't ask any more questions. He said to Zhang Shuiyuan in a low voice, you said that you put Tianyu under your pillow after you changed into your gown and forgot to put it on after you followed Lord Wang to the garden. During this period, Yu Swansea was with you and didn't have a chance to enter your room. Everyone can testify that unless she knows how to clone herself. This is nonsense. So if she stole your things, it must be when the 2 of you left the backyard alone. It was a short period of time. The mud on your shoes hasn't dried yet. Whoever entered your room must have left footprints on the ground. But go in and take a look yourself. Are there only 2 people's footprints on the ground? Other than you and Miss Chui, there's no third person. Shui Rui's sharp eyes stared straight at Chui Yun. The latter was stunned and then said nervously, I did enter Shui Yuan's room, but I was with her the whole time. After saying that, he hurriedly turned his head to look at Zhang Shuiyuan, but saw the doubt on her face. He immediately smiled bitterly, Shuiyuan, why would I take your Tianyu? Without your Zhang family's Tianyu scripture, what use do I have for it? Just as Zhang Shuiyuan's expression loosened, he heard Yu Shu say mockingly, you have no use for Tianyu, but what use do I have for it? I already said that thing is just a piece of broken stone to me. The few people outside the door looked at each other, thinking that this was strange. Yu Shu had never entered Zhang Shuiyuan's room, and Chui Yun had always been with Zhang Shuiyuan. Why did Tianyu disappear? Zhang Shuiyuan's face tensed up, and he glared at Yu Shu angrily. Ignoring everyone, he walked into the room alone, took the lamp on the table and checked inside and out. When he came out, he still stared at Yu Shu and said to Shui Rui, I can't agree with what Sir said. It's hard to guarantee that someone wouldn't change into a clean pair of shoes and come to my room. That way no one would know. After Shui Rui's analysis, she had calmed down quite a bit, and could finally use her brain. Chui Yun hurriedly added, that's right, she must have changed her shoes before coming here. This time, Lord Wang and the others shifted their suspicious gazes to Yu Shu's face. At this moment they heard Shui Rui ask, Shu, how many pairs of shoes are there in your room? Yu Shu crossed her arms. She finally knew why Shui Rui went to her room after looking at Zhang Shuiyuan's room. There was a hint of amusement hidden in her eyes as she cooperated with him and said, excluding the pair of shoes on my feet, there is only the pair of boots given to me in today's formal dress. Shui Rui said to everyone, follow me. The 7 people, including Lord Wang, followed Shui Rui to Yu Shu's room. After entering the door, they followed behind Shui Rui and entered the bedroom. They saw him open the wardrobe next to the bed, revealing the lattice inside. On the bottom layer there was a pair of light boots. Shui Rui took out the pair of boots, did not explain anything, just handed it to everyone and lifted the soles. There was not a speck of dust on it. Chapter 462. The second watch arrived. Then it could also be that she took off her shoes and went in barefoot. Shui Yun did not give up and tried to push this matter onto Yu Shu, but her eyes revealed some panic. Zhan Shuiyuan felt depressed. Looking at Shui Yun, her emotions were extremely complicated. On one hand, she hoped that Yu Shu had stolen her Tianyu, but on the other hand, she was afraid that she had wrongly accused the wrong person and let the real thief steal her treasure. Then do you want me to take off my shoes for you to see if my feet are clean? Yu Shu said mockingly. This caused Shui Rui to look at her disapprovingly. With him here, who would dare to ask her to take off her shoes, who would dare to look? There's no need for such superfluous actions. Shui Rui moved his gaze onto Shui Yun and said coldly, there's no need for you to quibble. According to my deductions, you ought to have been planning something when young Miss Zhan placed her heaven jade beneath her pillow. At that time, you seized the opportunity when she was unprepared to take it away from her right before her eyes, then you went out with her and left Yu Xuanzi alone in the rear courtyard to push the matter onto her. Darren, don't wrongly accuse me. Shui Yun was so anxious that her face turned red. According to what you said, then why should I drag Shui Yuan to visit the garden with Yu Xuanzi? Because you knew that I wouldn't go with you, Yu Shu said. That's not me. Shui Yun stomped her feet hard under everyone's questioning gaze and said angrily, if you don't believe me, you can search my room. Otherwise, let Shui Yuan search my body. If he can find Tianyu, I will kill myself here. Yin. Zhan Shuiyuan had already suspected Shui Yun, but seeing her so confident, he could not make up his mind. Shui Yuan, it really wasn't me. Shui Yun grabbed Zhan Shuiyuan's hand and was so anxious that she was about to cry. This was Huajin Garden, and she was a student that had been chosen to participate in the ancestral worship ceremony. If she was convicted of theft, with so many pairs of eyes watching, it would not be easy. Not to mention how she would be dealt with after the ancestral worship ceremony. If this matter were to spread, her reputation would be ruined. It would be a problem whether she could continue to stay in the Taisher library. Zhan Shuiyuan couldn't bear to do it, but for the sake of her family jewels, she couldn't let the thief off. Thus, she lowered her head and said in a muffled voice, then let me search. Shui Yun's shoulders trembled, and she finally let go of her hand. She said indignantly, okay, then you guys search. That's not necessary. You won't be able to find anything from her. Shui Rui said coldly. Under the puzzled gaze of the others, he put his left hand into his sleeve, took it out and handed it to Zhan Shuiyuan. Is this Tianyu? On his palm, there was an oval green stone with 8 claws and a fine silk thread tied to it. It was the heaven jade that Yu Shu had seen on Zhan Shuiyuan's neck a few days ago. My heaven jade. Zhan Shuiyuan let out a sharp cry of pleasant surprise and was about to pounce over to grab it, yet Shui Rui easily dodged to the side and turned to say to her. This rock was fished out from the shallow waters of the lake when the 13th princess was playing in the garden in the afternoon. According to my knowledge, Yu Xuanzi hasn't gone to the lake. Young Miss Zhan, can you tell me who threw it there? Zhan Shuiyuan's body shook, and she slowly turned her head to look at Shui Yun, whose face was red. Her chest rose and fell and she gritted her teeth and growled, so it was really you. Although the few people present didn't have brains, they weren't fools. When they heard this, they could already distinguish between right and wrong. Oh, Yu Shu dragged her voice and walked to Shui Rui's side. She turned her head to look at Zhan Shuiyuan and Shui Yun, and said with a fake smile, now I understand. Miss Chui's move is really brilliant. First, you stole Zhan Shuiyuan's heaven jade under her eyes, and then went in and out with her, looking for an opportunity to throw it away. In this way you can frame me and also not arouse suspicion. Even if you are investigated, there is no real evidence. But the bad thing is that you are unlucky to have met the wise and powerful Lord Shui. This little trick can't hide from Lord Shui's discerning eyes. When Shui Rui heard her last sentence of praise, he almost couldn't hold back his laughter. He turned his body and put his hands behind his back. From the view of others, he held a few of her fingers and held them gently, not saying a word. Even if the 13th princess didn't find this stone and hand it over to him to find its owner, he would still think of a way to protect Yu Shu's reputation. What Yu Shu said just now was what everyone present was thinking. It wasn't me, it really wasn't me. At this point, Shui Yun still wanted to quibble, but she didn't have the confidence. Her words and actions were powerless and she couldn't be trusted. Lord Wang said angrily, "Shui Yun, you still won't admit it? Do you really want this official to report this matter to the Great Tipping Point and punish you right now?" Other than Yu Shu, Lord Wang should be the most furious person present when such a shady matter happened in Huajin Garden. It should be known that before the end of the ceremony, these 6 people were temporarily under his control. If anything went wrong, he would also have to bear a part of the blame. Chui Yun was stared at by several pairs of fierce eyes, especially under Zhang Shuiyuan's murderous gaze. Chui Yun was glared at by several pairs of eyes, especially by Zhang Shuiyuan, who looked like he was going to devour her. Chui Yun could not bear the pressure. She knew that the evidence was irrefutable. If she continued to quibble, the situation would only worsen. So she shrunk her shoulders and cried, I didn't do it on purpose. At first I just wanted to play a joke on Shuiyuan, so I took her heaven jade. Who knew that when I was walking by the lake I accidentally lost it? I was afraid that she would cut off all ties with me, so I hid it from her. Seeing that she was suspicious of Yu Xuanzi, I took advantage of the situation. I didn't do it on purpose. As she spoke, she actually knelt in front of Zhang Shuiyuan in front of everyone, grabbed the hem of her clothes and begged. Such a change was unexpected. The original theft and framing was instantly twisted into a joke by her, but she cried so miserably that no one could tell whether it was real or fake. As long as Zhang Shuiyuan, the owner of the lost heaven jade, did not pursue the matter, it would not be difficult for her. Yu Shu narrowed her eyes and a cold light flashed across them. She thought to herself, I misjudged. This seemingly inconspicuous Chui Yun is not someone who is easy to deal with. Zhang Shuiyuan was not a person with a heart of stone. Previously he was angry because of the loss of Heaven Jade, and also because he found out that Chui Yun had used and betrayed him. But now that Heaven Jade was found, looking at Chui Yun's pitiful face, and thinking of the days since she came to the capital, the two of them could not help but soften. Chui Yuan, it's all my fault. I beg you, don't blame me. I didn't steal your Heaven Jade. I didn't do it on purpose. Can you forgive me? I don't want to be treated as a thief, I beg you. Zhang Shuiyuan turned his head, clenched his fists and said in a low voice, Don't cry, I won't pursue this matter. Shuiyuan, Chui Yun raised her head and was about to rejoice when she heard a sneer behind her. If you don't pursue this matter, I won't let you go. Zhang Shuiyuan looked at Yu Shu blankly, and suddenly remembered their previous agreement about the 10 slaps. Yu Xuanzi, it's all my fault. I'm willing to take your slaps on behalf of Shuiyuan. Chui Yun's brain was fast enough. She took the blame, and Zhang Shuiyuan's original anger towards her was immediately reduced by half. However, Yu Shu was schemed against and almost suffered a great loss. Would she let the two of them go so easily? Zhang Shuiyuan, Yu Shu simply called his name at this moment, and pointed at Chui Yun who was kneeling on the ground shamelessly. Do you really want her to take the slaps on behalf of you? Zhang Shuiyuan's expression struggled for a moment, and then nodded his head lightly as a tacit agreement. Alright, I'm not unreasonable. Since both of you are willing, then these 10 slaps you can split it equally, each of you can take 5 slaps. Yu Shu waved her hand, pretending to be generous. Zhang Shuiyuan and Chui Yun's expression twisted at the same time, and wanted to say something to resist, but they did not know where to start. After all, they were the ones in the wrong, and with Shui Rui by the side, they could not deny it even if they said it to the end of the world. If you want to hit, then hit, don't talk so much nonsense. Although Zhang Shuiyuan knew that he had wronged Yu Shu, but he did not change his hatred towards Yu Shu, and because of this he hated her even more. Yu Shu curled her lips and smiled, There's no hurry, we still have to attend the ceremony tomorrow. My hand is strong, and if I slap your faces swollen, how are you going to meet people tomorrow? Just owe it first and we'll talk about it when we return to the capital. She loved to slap people's faces in public and there were only a few people here, how could it be enough? If she wanted to slap their faces she would have to find a good day. Zhang Shuiyuan and Chui Yun's hearts trembled, and after thinking about it, they understood that Yu Shu wanted to leave it for the future to humiliate them in public. Yu Shu saw the worry on their faces, and the gloominess in her heart dissipated. She quietly squeezed Shui Rui's warm palm, and in the next moment she heard Shui Rui say, The situation is urgent, this official will not report this matter for the time being, but you have disturbed Huajin Garden, and this matter cannot be tolerated. After the ceremony, Official Wang and I will report the matter to the head supervisor, and ask him to make a decision. Chui Yun's face turned pale, she did not expect that after she escaped one calamity, there would be another one. This time, Zhang Shuiyuan did not speak up for her, and she could not even protect herself, so why would she care about these two people? They deserved their bad luck. She did not know what the relationship between Shui Rui and Yu Shu was, but based on their malicious slander of Yu Shu, how could Shui Rui let them go so easily? Official Wang, you stay and teach them so that they do not cause trouble tonight. I still have something to do, so I will leave first. Shui Rui let go of Yu Shu's hand, and gave the sky jade to Official Wang, and slowly walked out of the door. When he was at the door, he stopped and turned his head slightly. It seemed like he did it unintentionally, but it was noticed by those who were observant. Yu Shu secretly laughed and said to Official Wang, I will send off Official Shui. Okay, you go first. Official Wang was grateful to Shui Rui for helping him solve a problem, so he was happy to have someone pay attention to him. Thus, Yu Shu followed Shui Rui's footsteps, and the two of them walked out of the courtyard one after the other. Little Jeezy carried a lantern and followed them. They left behind a group of people who were destined to have a sleepless night. The night was dark, and the shadows of the buildings by the lake gradually faded. Eunuch Chiu stood outside a curtain with his back bowed, reporting in a low voice what had happened in the southwest side courtyard in the evening to his master. After a while, he heard a comment from behind the curtain, according to what you said, that you Swansea is not a good-natured person. Eunuch Chiu listened carefully, trying to figure out Imperial concubine Shui's tone. It did not sound like she was displeased, so he carefully said, fortunately she has a temper and managed to control those unruly people. Otherwise we would not know the outcome of tonight's matter. Ah. Eunuch Chiu heard this chuckle, and immediately knew that he had not misunderstood. Chapter 463. Shui Rui didn't let Yu Shu send him too far away. They walked out of the side courtyard and walked on a small path talking about the farce just now. Those two female students were targeting you. One of them deliberately set a trap for you to jump into. What's going on? Shui Rui asked curiously. He saw through tonight's incident clearly. The one surnamed Zhang was just a fool, and the one surnamed Chui was the instigator. He just didn't know why she took so much effort to smear Yu Shu's name. It was a little strange. Yu Shu understood Shui Rui's meaning. She frowned and said, I'm also puzzled. Logically speaking, I've only known them for a few days. If there's any conflict before, it's when you went to the observatory to investigate the case. But Chui Yun wasn't there at that time, and I don't remember when I had a conflict with her. If it's because Lord Wang asked me to hold the 8 trigrams artifact, and they were unwilling, then they shouldn't have chosen this critical moment to commit a crime. Before the ancestral worshipping ceremony, the 6 of us will suffer together. No matter how I look at it, Chui Yun doesn't seem like a brainless person. From the day she moved into Huajin Garden, Zhan Shuiyuan and Chui Yun had been making things difficult for her. Yu Shu took care of the situation and endured for a while. She didn't have a direct confrontation with them. They wanted to change rooms, so she changed rooms. At the beginning, she also let them choose the artifact first. If it wasn't for the fact that they were going to make a big deal out of this matter tonight, she wouldn't have turned hostile at all. Shui Rui said, fortunately you came to find me in time. Otherwise things wouldn't get out of hand. No matter what, you have to be careful. Don't make any mistakes during tomorrow's ceremony. Yu Shu smiled bitterly. Before I came, I knew that I would be attacked by villains. But this kind of thing is hard to guard against. Look at me, I was lying in my room and sleeping, but I was still framed. Fortunately you came. Otherwise it wouldn't be easy to clean up. Being a master of disguise has its own depression. You only know one thing but don't know the other, so it's hard to be comprehensive. Shui Rui turned his head. Under the moonlight, a pair of bright peach blossom eyes looked at her with a smile. You did well tonight. Yu Shu's heart skipped a beat at his smile. She asked in confusion, really? What's so good about it? Shui Rui raised his arm, ignoring the fact that there was a little spy following behind him. He wrapped his arm around Yu Shu's bony shoulder and gently pulled her into his arms. He lowered his head and said gently, it's okay. Lean on me more. Yu Shu couldn't resist his blatant intimacy and her face heated up. She lightly coughed and put her hand on his chest, but she couldn't bear to push him away. Amidst the chirping of cicadas and the cool summer night, the two of them quietly stayed like this for a while before Shui Rui regretfully let go of her and said, go back and rest early. Tomorrow won't be easy. And you should sleep early too. As soon as Yu Shu left his embrace, she had a tiny bit of reluctance. She turned her head to look at the young eunuch who was looking around nearby. When she saw that he wasn't staring at her, she stood on her tiptoes and swiftly kissed Shui Rui's cheek. Without waiting for him to react, she retreated, turned around and swaggered off. Shui Rui was stunned. He touched his face and looked at her leaving figure. His lips gradually curled up. The 9th day of the 5th month was the death anniversary of the Dan dynasty's founding ruler, Emperor Anwu. It was the Saint Ancestor Worship Day. The imperial tomb-raising ceremony was held to worship the ancestors and heaven to pray for the prosperity of the future. Before dawn, Huazhen Garden became busy inside and outside. In a corner of the West Garden, the 6 people from Taisher Library had finished bathing early and changed into ceremonial robes. Under the guidance of Wang Darren of the Ministry of Rites, they went to the imperial tomb. Along the way, the atmosphere in the carriage was very heavy. Due to the effects of last night's incident, Zhang Shuiyuan and Cui Yun did not sleep well. Their faces were painted and barely covered the bruises under their eyes, but they couldn't hide their listlessness. The two still sat next to each other, but they weren't as close as when they came. Yu Shu, on the other hand, had a good sleep because of Shui Rui. She crossed her arms and leaned against the carriage with her eyes closed, enjoying the peace and quiet. After about 3 to 5 miles, the carriage stopped. Hearing Wang Darren's voice, Yu Shu, who was sitting by the door, was the first to jump off the carriage. The imperial tomb was built at the foot of Qi Mountain. The east and west were connected by the sun, the north by the dense forest and the south by the flowing river. The carriage stopped at the edge of the grayish-blue city wall. Looking up, there were 81 steps of jade platform. It was grand and magnificent. The scarlet carpet stretched all the way to the north. The mountain breeze blew, and the east was green and white. Yu Shu squinted her eyes to feel the feng shui of the land of Crouching Dragon. It was very amazing. Wait here for a moment, I'll go get the weapons. Wang Darren reminded them, then he greeted the mausoleum guards in front of him and walked away. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Wang Darren returned. He was accompanied by another ceremonial officer and a small group of mausoleum guards. Each of them was holding a small wooden box. Yu Shu knew that the boxes contained martial emperor true weapons, so she focused her attention on the boxes. She saw the other ceremonial officer open the box and take out the weapons one by one. He handed them to Wang Darren, then passed them to the 6 of them. Yu Shu's eyes lit up when she saw these heavy bronze artifacts that glowed with a faint red light. Even though she didn't have any spiritual roots or spiritual energy, she could feel that they were extraordinary. Apart from the shape, they were similar to the fake artifacts that Lord Wang had given them before. Only their weight was comparable. She felt an indescribable heaviness as soon as she held the bagua plate in her hand. When the cold bronze object came into contact with her palm, she couldn't help but shiver. A faint trace of fear rose in her heart. She turned around to look at the other 5 people. They all had strange expressions on their faces. It seemed that she wasn't the only one who was affected. Lord Darren was not surprised at all. He led the 6 of them to the ceremonial officer who had come with him and warned them sternly, "Follow Lord Ning into the mausoleum for now. Hold the weapons in your hands well. Don't drop them." After that, he glared at Cui Yun and Zhang Shuiyuan with a hint of warning, then hurried to the east with the mausoleum guards. Lord Ning was 2 or 3 years older than Lord Wang. He looked rigid. After examining the people in front of him, he meticulously led them to the high platform. While giving instructions, he kept a close eye on their steps, as if he was afraid that they would drop the weapons in their hands. To be honest, the 81 steps were not difficult, but it was different when they were holding the bronze pieces that weighed 7 or 8 kilograms. Even Yu Shu was slightly out of breath after climbing to the top of the platform without stopping, let alone the weak Zhang Shuiyuan and Cui Yun. The 2 of them were at the back. Under Lord Ning's dissatisfied gaze, they gritted their teeth and climbed up. "When the ceremony begins, you will wait here until His Majesty ascends the platform. You will do this." Lord Ning carefully explained the process of following the emperor. He told them that there would be a ceremonial boy leading the way, and they only needed to remember to follow the ceremonial boy closely. The 6 of them formed 2 columns. Yu Shu and Wen Xiao, and were arranged to walk on the east and west sides of the imperial carriage. They held the 8 trigrams treasured sword in front. As long as the 2 of them did not make any mistakes, the 4 people behind them would be able to keep their eyes open. In the blink of an eye, the sun rose. Yu Shu and the others were led by Lord Ning to walk a few times on the Mausoleum Avenue. They were familiar with the route, but they were also very tired. There was a large underground palace under the imperial mausoleum, but the top was like an ordinary garden. The scenery was pleasant, and every entrance was guarded by light-armored mausoleum guards with long spears in their hands. The security was tight. The altar was placed on top of the heavenly altar, and white banners were fluttering around it. More than 10 Taoists in blue robes wandered around the heavenly altar, waving their banners. Their expressions were solemn and no one knew what they were doing. Yushu looked at them curiously, but when she heard Lord Ning cough, she hurriedly lowered her head to look at the road. When it was almost time, Lord Ning led them back to the starting point of the high platform. He asked them to temporarily put the objects in their hands on a piece of white cloth and rest for a while. Yushu rubbed her arms and looked down from the steps. She saw that outside the imperial mausoleum, which was deserted in the morning, there were now carriages and horses parked outside. There were shadows of people and the sound of horns came intermittently from the distance. At the bottom of the heavenly altar, there was another world. There was a secret room 30 feet above their heads, and there were thousands of holes in the air. Beams of sunlight shone down, and the zigzagging walls were faintly discernible, flashing and disappearing, bursting with colorful splendor. Unexpectedly, there were countless jade stones inlaid on the walls. At the end of a moss-mottled stone tablet, there was a deep and bottomless pool of water. 2 figures were sitting beside the pool. The faint sound of a horn came from above. Jing Chen was sitting cross-legged, dressed in a long white Taoist robe. His black hair, like dark clouds, draped over his shoulders reaching the ground. His elegant face was illuminated by the pond water, flickering between bright and dark. Zhu Muzhao was standing beside him. When he heard the sound of the horn, he said, "In another hour the emperor will open the altar, and with the help of the upstanding qi of the imperial mausoleum, he will execute the 7 killers. Once the water of the underworld moves, you will see the people who have killed their lives." Hearing this, Jing Chen's face did not change at all. He had been meditating for days and his mind was clear. At this moment, there was no distracting thought in his mind, and all his emotions were in the void. At noon, 500 imperial guards lined the road and personally arrived outside the imperial mausoleum. The current emperor, his concubines, children, grandchildren, relatives, and important ministers of the imperial court, a group of dozens of people climbed the high platform in a burst of music and the ceremonial officers sang. Yushu saw the approaching crowd from a distance. A touch of bright yellow entered her eyes. She swallowed nervously and held the bronze vessel in her hand firmly. She was not as calm as she was an hour ago, and her heart was crazy with excitement. In the past more than 20 years, she never thought that one day she could see the ancient emperor with her own eyes. He was not an actor but a real emperor. It was a hot summer day, so it didn't take long for Yushu, who was wearing a heavy dress, to have a layer of sweat on her forehead. However, she didn't dare to raise her hand to wipe it off. When the imperial carriage passed in front of her, she lowered her head and followed behind it. After walking a dozen or so steps, Yushu felt eyes sweeping over her body one after another. She knew that it was a noble looking at her, so her gait became even more steady. Carrying an artifact was tiring work, but it was indeed a good job. To be able to become familiar with the eyes of a large number of nobles and accompany the monarch, this was an opportunity that some people couldn't ask for in their entire lives. Along the way, people burned incense and worshipped in silence. When they walked to the bottom of the altar, Yushu felt that her whole back was wet with sweat. Thanks to the 3 layers of unlined clothes inside, she did not lose her manners. Chapter 464. A drop of sweat rolled down the tip of Yushu's nose. She blinked her eyes and slightly raised her eyes to peek at the Dain emperor who was kowtowing to the sky on the temple of heaven. She muttered in her heart, "Why is it not over yet?" The ceremonial officers' high-pitched singing did not stop, one after another. Yushu was a little upset listening to it. It was as if a bee had drilled into her head and kept buzzing. The blue-robed Taoists were scattered around the 9 cauldrons around the temple of heaven. They ignited a large number of incense sticks with talismans one by one. The white smoke soon filled everyone's eyes. Suddenly, a gust of east wind blew and hot air blew against her face. Yushu almost sneezed because of the smell of incense, but she gritted her teeth and endured it. In the blink of an eye, the sun in the sky was suddenly covered by clouds, and the sky suddenly became gloomy as if a storm was coming. Yushu was secretly puzzled. According to her calculations the day before, there should not be rain today. Just as she was thinking, there was a sudden explosion of thunder in her ears. Rumble. In the crowd, there was a woman's exclamation, and the scene began to become noisy. Shui Rue, who was among several civil officials, looked up at the layers of dark clouds in the sky. He did not know why his mood was a little depressed and he had a bad premonition. Yushu was also frightened by the sound of thunder. She couldn't help but raise her head to look. She saw that between the mountains in the distance, there were silver bolts of lightning in the shape of a snake. It was extremely shocking. At the bottom of the Temple of Heaven, the whistling wind filled the cave. Outside, there was thunder and lightning, and the thousands of holes on the top wall gradually darkened. Jing Chen stared motionlessly at a quiet pool in front of him. Zhu Muzhao stood beside him with a dignified expression. From time to time he looked up and clenched his fists behind his back. Rumble. All of a sudden, ripples appeared in the tranquil pool, one after another, as if there was an invisible hand stirring the water. The turbid water slowly became clear, and it was extremely strange. Jing Chen's steady heartbeat intensified as the ripples in front of his eyes intensified. His eyes became a little confused. As his mind swayed, he heard a series of secret words in his ears. The Great Way is invisible, but it gives birth to heaven and earth. The Great Way is emotionless, but it runs the sun and the moon. The Great Way is nameless, but it nourishes all things. Jing Chen's mind was blank, as if his soul had left his body. Everything in his mind was empty, except for the bright ripples in front of him, circle after circle. A blurry figure floated out of the water. Zhu Muzhao recited the Taoist heart-cleansing incantation in a low voice while watching Jing Chen's face. His expression changed slightly when he saw Jing Chen's face reflected by the water. With a light gasp, Jing Chen snapped out of his daze and closed his eyes. In an instant, the ripples in the pond dimmed and calmed down. Zhu Muzhao held his sweaty palms and patiently waited for him to calm down before asking in a deep voice, "How is it? Did you see it?" Jing Chen was silent for a long time. He opened his eyes and looked at the pond. He stretched out his hand and touched the calm surface of the water. But other than the coldness and moisture from his fingertips, it was like ordinary water. What he saw with his own eyes was just an illusion. "I saw it." Zhu Muzhao's eyes lit up with joy. "Is it a man or a woman? Have you seen it?" "Uncle, can you first tell me how to solve my fate after I find the person who broke my fate?" Before today, Jing Chen had asked the same question more than once. Every time Zhu Muzhao simply said, "It's not the right time." Before Jing Chen left the mountain, the sect leader and his master did not explain much about this. So, in order to solve fate, he could only listen to the arrangements of the celestial commissioner, Zhu Muzhao. Zhu Muzhao did not answer immediately. Looking at his expression, he seemed to be thinking about something. Jing Chen shook off the water droplets on his hand and stood up. He turned his head and looked at Zhu Muzhao, saying, "You don't have to hide it. I already know that I am the great in calamity. I carry the fate of our dynasty for 100 years. Great fate brings disaster. If I can't find the person who broke my fate, not only will the elders of the sect be implicated, the world will also be in turmoil. Now that I know who the person is, why don't you tell me honestly how to break my fate?" Zhu Muzhao was slightly stunned. He immediately lowered his chin and said with a solemn face, "Where did you know all this?" Jing Chen's pair of clear and intelligent eyes were calm. He said, "I cultivated in the mountains and was not a common person. After I left the mountains, I came into contact with the prosperity and decline of the world. I became suspicious. Although my mother was a princess and my father was famous for a time, a person's death is like a lamp going out. His Majesty pitied my life but did not need to go to war. He sent a few enlightened Jinren of Longhu Mountain to extend the life of an orphan like me. I think there must be a hidden reason. Cultivators follow the will of heaven. Why would the sect sacrifice themselves to save the life of an orphan like me and change my fate? If I guessed correctly, there must be some kind of agreement between the imperial family of Daen and the righteous sect. That is commonly known as the price." Later on, my Shimi Shui Yun came to the capital. She said that it was to face the calamity and enter the world. But I realized that she was ordered by her teacher to monitor me. After I probed her several times, she told me the inside story of the Daen calamity. I then confirmed that it was not only me who wanted to find the person who broke my fate, the imperial family of Daen also wanted to find the person. Listening to this confession, Zhu Muzhao's palms moved. He looked at Jing Chen's face, which was similar to the person in his memory. In a trance, he seemed to see that calm man again. He said softly, "You are the same as your father. You look muddle-headed, but your heart is clearer than anyone else." Jing Chen's eyes darkened, and a hint of bitterness appeared between his brows. His parents had passed away when he was young, and he had been raised by his sect. Ever since he was sensible, he had been surrounded by all kinds of strange gazes. The loneliness and unwillingness of his youth had all been covered up by the heavy kindness he had received. He could not feel sorrow, be happy, be sad, or be angry. He had always remembered his fate. But in the end, the elders who raised him valued his identity more. His uncle who loved him was for the country's fate. Even his father who died for his mother may not care about his life and death. In the short 19 years of life, there was only a short period of time that could be called happy, and only in that short period of time, there was someone who treated him sincerely. That day, in order to force him to cut off his feelings, his junior sister did not hesitate to tell him the truth about the great calamity, and made him choose. She saw through his mind and wanted him to cut off that infatuation. So he made up his mind and cut off all ties with her. He used those high-sounding reasons to cover up his true fear. He was the great calamity. If he delayed the country's fate because of a moment of personal feelings, then the emperor would not let her go if he knew the whole story. After that, he chanted the clear heart mantra 100 times every day to stabilize his Taoist heart. Until today, when he saw the life destroyer in the shadow of the yellow springs, he dared to indulge himself. Zhu Muzhao sighed deeply and put his hand on Jing Chen's shoulder. He said warmly, "You are only half right. The emperor sent you to the righteous path not only because you are the great calamity, but also because you are the child of Princess Liue. You are of the royal bloodline. You are his nephew." Jing Chen's expression did not change. He looked at him and said, "Then tell me, after I find the life destroyer, how do I solve it?" He did not want to be kept in the dark and be manipulated by others. His every move was arranged by others. Zhu Muzhao sensed his distrust and knew that it was useless to say more. He put his hand on his shoulder and turned to look at the yellow springs. He said expressionlessly, "Actually, it is not difficult. As long as you know who the life destroyer is, according to the Book of Mystery Maiden, if the life destroyer is a man, you can kill him as a sacrifice to heaven. This can protect the great calamity for 300 years. You also do not have to be trapped by Kidu Star anymore." A cold look flashed in Jing Chen's eyes. "What if it is a woman?" Zhu Muzhao looked back at him and smiled. "If it is a woman, you need to tie the knot with her. As long as you give birth to descendants, the life destroyer will break and you will not have to worry." Jing Chen was stunned. His heart skipped 2 beats. His expression was a little strange. He asked, "What is the Book of Mystery Maiden? Can I see it with my own eyes?" Zhu Muzhao took in his expression, shook his head and said, "The Book of Mystery Maiden Lu Ren is a relic left behind by Empress Ningzhen. There are many secrets recorded in it. Other than the current His Majesty, only the previous imperial astronomer can read it. If you don't believe me, you can think carefully. Why does a troublemaker have to stick to his Taoist heart?" Jing Chen said in a low voice, "My master told me that if I love and hate at will without finding the life destroyer, it will lead to natural and man-made disasters." Zhu Muzhao sneered, "That is a lie. They don't want you to fall in love. It has nothing to do with the evil spirit of Kidu Star. In fact, it is to prevent you from not being able to kill the man you meet and not being able to marry the woman you meet after you find the life destroyer." Jing Chen's pupils constricted. He looked at Zhu Muzhao in disbelief, trying to distinguish the truth from the lies on his face. The warning that made him careful turned out to be a lie? Zhu Muzhao looked at him with pity and said, "Let me tell you another true story. 100 years ago there was a troublemaker in our dynasty. He followed the mandate of heaven. Unfortunately, the life destroyer he found was his sworn brother. He couldn't bear to go back on his word and almost caused a disaster. What happened in the end? Did he die?" Zhu Muzhao said lightly, "Of course he died. Compared to the country and the people, it was just a human life. He died a worthy death." Jing Chen was silent. After Zhu Muzhao said these words, he asked again, "I have told you everything I can say. Now you can tell me, was the life destroyer you saw a man or a woman?" "It was a woman." Zhu Muzhao's expression softened and said, "Fortunately it was a woman, so it was spared. Have you seen that person before? If you haven't, when you go back you can draw the person. I will send people to find him, but it will take some effort." "No need. It was someone I know." "Oh?" Zhu Muzhao asked curiously, "Who is it? Do I know him?" Chapter 465. The sky suddenly changed during the ancestral worship ceremony. The strange phenomenon of thunder and lightning came and went quickly. A moment ago there were flashes of lightning and roars of thunder, but in the next moment, there were no flags and drums. The dark clouds dispersed, and before the crowd could react, the sun appeared again. This temporary abnormality did not affect the ceremony. Instead, a gust of wind made people feel cool. The sweat on Yushu's face dried up and she felt a chill on her back. She followed the emperor and was not far from the group of officials and nobles. Thus, when she heard people whispering about the spirit of the sacred ancestor, She felt a little strange. She quietly raised her head and found Shui Rui's figure in the crowd. Her line of sight moved a few times before she met his steady gaze. At that moment, she smiled lightly at him and held up the 8 trigrams bronze artifact in her hand, hinting to him that she could still hold on. Next, the Book of Rites and Prayers were sung. The emperor, who was nearly 50 years old, walked around the Temple of Heaven and performed the rites. Then he led his officials back. According to official Ning's instructions, Yu Shu and the others did not need to go back with the emperor. Thus, they stood where they were and respectfully sent the emperor off. As soon as the emperor left, they could not stand it anymore. Zhan Shuiyuan and Cui Yun scrambled to put the bronze artifact in their hands on the ground and sat down on the carpet by the roadside to catch their breath. Yu Shu looked around and saw that the people around her did not have any strange expressions. She tidied up the things that needed to be tidied up and tidied up the things that needed to be tidied up. It seemed that she was used to the delicate behavior of the people holding the bronze artifact. She hugged the bronze artifact and sat down on the ground. Among the 6 people, only Wen Xiao and was still holding the heavy bronze artifact and stood there stiffly. "I'm so tired. If I stood for a while longer, I would have fallen down." Sun Jun panted like a fool. He used his wide sleeves to make a fan and fanned his face. Another young man was also so tired that he stuck out his tongue. He looked up at Wen Xiaoan and laughed dryly. "Wen Xiao, and why are you still standing? If you don't sit down and rest, you might not even have the strength to go back later." Wen Xiao and glanced at him and then turned his head away, making the young man feel awkward. "Hey, get up quickly. How can you just put the cultivation artifact on the ground?" With a low cry, Lord Wang appeared out of nowhere with a few mausoleum guards behind him, carrying boxes. With an unfriendly expression, he urged them to pick up the bronze artifacts and personally inspect them before putting them back into the boxes. "All right, Teacher Xiaoyi, this is the end. There are carriages waiting outside. I will get someone to send you back first." Lord Wang had been worried for many days. Today he could finally let go. He could not wait to throw the burden away. Lord. Zhan Shuiyuan and the others patted their buttocks and left with the others. Yu Shu lagged a few steps behind. When she turned around and saw Lord Wang still standing there watching them leave, she turned around and walked over to him. She bowed and said, "I have troubled Lord Wang for these few days." After a few days of observation, Yu Shu felt that the ceremonial officer in front of her was reliable and capable. She didn't know when they would meet again, so it was better to make friends. Lord Wang smiled. "You Swansea, what are you talking about? This is my duty." Yu Shu put down her hand and said, "I still have to thank Darren for your care. I will be returning to the capital in a few days. I have no other forte, but I do have some skills in seeking fortune-telling. I can boast that I am not any worse than the masters in the Great Exchange Hall. If Darren has any difficulties, you can send a letter to Wang Jilu at Dema Street to look for me." Lord Wang's expression changed. He looked at the precocious young girl in front of him and compared her to the pampered young masters from the Taisher Library. It was not difficult to see that she would have a bright future. His mind also became active, so he nodded and accepted Yu Shu's good intentions. He extended his hand and took the initiative to send her to the outer circle. Yu Shu was the last to sit on the carriage back to Huajin Garden. Even though the people on the carriage were impatient, no one dared to say anything. Yu Shu's fierce and forceful performance last night was still in their minds. Even the 2 boys were faintly afraid of her, not to mention Zhan and Cui, who didn't even have the strength to speak. The journey back to the side courtyard of Huajin Garden was silent. The people on the carriage wished they could wash off the sweat on their bodies and comfortably lie on the bed to sleep. Unfortunately, there was still a group of nobles waiting to serve them in the garden. There was no extra manpower to pay attention to them. Yu Shu didn't care about the others. Once she entered the room, she took off her heavy dress and put on an undershirt. She used the water left in the morning to wipe her body. She took out the medicinal oil that He Fangji had given her when she left the house from the wardrobe. She sat cross-legged on the bed and applied it to her arms and legs to prevent any side effects and soreness for a while. In the blink of an eye, the afternoon passed. Yu Shu lay on the bed snoring. She didn't know that there were people talking about her in another part of the garden. Zhu Muzhao waved away the attendants accompanying him. He had his personal guard stay downstairs and went upstairs alone. Jing Qin had already changed out of his Taoist robe. After a bath, he stood refreshed at the window, looking at the scenery of the garden. Between his sword-like brows was a faint cloud of worry, like it was surrounded by fog. Jing Qin. A call brought him back to his senses. He turned his head to look at the approaching Zhu Muzhao and asked, "Uncle, have you seen His Majesty?" Zhu Muzhao nodded and said, "His Majesty is very happy to know that you found the Fate Breaker." After a pause, he said with a pleasant expression, "As for the words you said to me in the Emperor's cave, I will pretend I didn't hear them. When you meet the Emperor, don't mention them again." The words spoken out of anger referred to the words Jing Chen had said after seeing the Fate Breaker. He had revealed his suspicions about the disaster of the Daen. This was more or less a sign of fear of the Emperor. The Emperor might not be angry when he heard this, but it was inevitable that he would be estranged from this nephew. Jing Chen's expression did not change. He was not at all worried that Zhu Muzhao would say that he wasn't the disaster of the Daen in front of the Emperor. Compared to this, he was more concerned about the problem he was about to face. Zhu Muzhao did not notice the worry in his heart. He continued to speak, "Since we already know that Yu Shu is the Fate Breaker, we still need you to spend more effort on her so that she is willing to marry you and become husband and wife. But regarding the secrets of the disaster of the Daen and the fate of our dynasty, you must not reveal them to her. Furthermore, you must not let her know of your identity as the Fate Breaker. Remember this." "That is difficult," Jing Chen said with an indifferent expression. "Before this, because of my worry, I broke off all ties with her. The two of us are like strangers. Now, I want her to cultivate the love of Qin and Jin, but I cannot tell her the truth. It will be difficult for her to even pay attention to me, much less agree to become husband and wife with me." Zhu Muzhao frowned slightly. Originally, when things had progressed to this stage, as long as the Emperor issued an edict, regardless of whether Yu Shu was willing or not, she would have to submit. But the situation now was different. First, several months ago, Jing Chen had been ambushed on his way to the capital and almost lost his life. Second, a murder had occurred in Taisha Shu Garden not long ago. An innocent female student had died. The target was Jing Chen. All kinds of targeting showed that there were people secretly thinking of ways to obstruct the disaster of the Daen from breaking the Fate Breaker. On the surface, the Emperor had handed over the matter of Jing Chen's death to Ning Wang to investigate. In reality, he had secretly sent out spies to investigate, but to no avail. What was worth rejoicing was that from the angle of the other party's attack, he could use divination to deduce that they only knew of the existence of the disaster of the Daen and the Fate Breaker. As for how to find the Fate Breaker and how to break the Fate Breaker, they did not know. Because they could not confirm the identity of the Fate Breaker, they repeatedly probed and killed. In such a situation, if the Emperor suddenly arranged a marriage for Daozi after worshipping the ancestors, it was clearly telling the other party that there was something fishy going on. In order to protect the safety of the Fate Breaker and not ruin the important matter, the Emperor discussed with him. Not only could they not arrange a marriage, they had to find another target, to attract the attention of those people in the dark. Then they could follow the clues and catch them all. After thinking for a while, Zhu Muzhao raised his head and said to Jing Chen, "There's no hurry to break the Fate Breaker. In short, the person has been found. Don't let her be suspicious and find a chance to get close to her. I have also seen Miss Yu twice. From her appearance, she isn't a short-sighted person. You only need to lie to her that your Fate Breaker has been broken. Since you and she have gone through thick and thin together, it shouldn't be difficult for you to forget about the past. Moreover," at this point, he revealed a smile and said, "In my opinion, you have a good impression of her. Since you don't have any worries, you might as well learn more about the ways of men and women. This way you can have the best of both worlds and become a good couple. Isn't that good?" Hearing this, a suspicious red appeared on Jing Chen's handsome face. He tilted his head to avoid Zhu Muzhao's penetrating gaze and looked out the window again. In a low voice, he mocked himself, "In the end, I still lied to her. What's so good about it?" Zhu Muzhao looked at the side of Jing Chen's face and fell into a trance for a moment. It was as if he had gone back to 20 years ago and heard the same words. However, the words were still ringing in his ears. After a moment of absent-mindedness, he quickly regained his composure and sincerely said to the young man in front of him, who had a rough life, "Fate is like this. Since you can't go against it, you have to accept it. If you can't accept it, the world is full of bitterness. Think on the bright side." Jing Chen didn't say anything and looked into the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. Zhu Muzhao didn't try to persuade him anymore. He gave him a few more instructions and then left. After he left, Jing Chen called in a servant and ordered, "Where are the people chosen from the Imperial Historian's library to carry the artifacts? Go and find out." "Yes, I will go now." Usually, after the ancestral worship ceremony, the emperor would return to the palace, while some of the nobles would stay in Huajin Garden for a few days. The nearby forest was dense, and there was a natural enclosure 5 miles west of here for hunting horses. Yushu had eaten dinner in the evening and was about to pack her luggage when she heard a servant outside the door say, "Miss Yu, there is an official in the front yard who wants to see you." Yushu thought that it might be official Wang from the Ministry of Rights. Unexpectedly, when she arrived at the front yard, she saw Shui Rui leisurely sitting in the hall waiting for her. "Eldest brother, why are you here?" Shui Rui pointed at a chair and asked her to sit down. He looked her up and down and asked, "Did you rest well?" "Yes, I slept." "Do your arms and legs hurt from standing for so long during the day?" Shui Rui knew that the bronze artifacts were not light. When he saw her holding them in her hands, her head covered in sweat and her face red from the sun, it would be a lie to say that he didn't feel bad. Yushu kicked her legs. "I'm not that delicate." Shui Rui said, "That's good. Tomorrow we'll walk around the forest and I'll show you the surrounding scenery." "Didn't His Majesty say that he's leaving for the capital tomorrow?" "You're not leaving?" Yushu asked curiously. Shui Rui then told her that every year after the ancestral worship ceremony, with the emperor's permission, the young nobles would stay. As soon as Yushu heard that she would be staying to play with the princes and princesses, she immediately lost interest. Chapter 466. Early in the morning, carriages and horses were gathered outside Huajin Garden. The emperor was returning to the capital. Several people from Taisher Library had packed their clothes early in the morning and were waiting in the front yard. There were 6 of them, but one was missing when they left. "It's almost time. Why hasn't Yu Xuanzi come out yet?" Sun Jun was sitting on a chair with 2 bags in his arms. He looked out of the door for a while and looked back at Zhan Shuiyuan and Cui Yun. He said hesitantly, "Can one of you go to the backyard and call her?" Zhan Shuiyuan said to Cui Yun coldly, "Go and call her. Don't delay our journey because of her." Cui Yun didn't dare to get close to Yushu and she couldn't refute Zhan Shuiyuan. She said hesitantly, "Let's find a servant." "Just go." "What are you talking about?" Zhan Shuiyuan didn't want to be nice to Cui Yun. She could forgive Cui Yun for losing her Chanyu, but she couldn't let it go. When Xiaoan held half of the sweet bun left from last night in his hand, he broke it into pieces and sent it into his mouth. Watching them pushing and shoving each other, he said lazily, "Don't call her. She won't go with us." When Xiaoan was the only one who told Yushu that she was going to stay. Hearing this, everyone looked confused. Sun Jun asked confusedly, "She won't go? What do you mean? She wants to stay?" Zhan Shuiyuan sneered, "Is Huajin Garden a place where she can stay if she wants to?" This was the royal garden, not an inn or a restaurant. Cui Yun said sourly, "She can't stay by herself. It's different if someone asks." Zhan Shuiyuan was suspicious. "What did you say?" Being born in one of the 12 prefectures of the capital, Cui Yun naturally knew more than Zhan Shuiyuan, who was a disciple from outside the capital. Thus, she told her about the tradition of the princes and princesses staying in Huajin Garden for the summer after the annual worship ceremony. There were not many opportunities for such a group of noble descendants to gather together. "Yu Xuanzi can stay here. I guess it's most likely because of the 9th prince. Didn't you see that Imperial Consort Nyang Yang has been sending people to deliver food to her?" "Oh right, wasn't Yu Xuanzi invited by the 9th prince to attend this year's Double Sun gathering? I nearly forgot about this layer of relationship. No wonder when that happened young Master Shui personally came over." Cui Yun muttered and accidentally mentioned the night before yesterday. She immediately shut her mouth and carefully looked at Zhan Shuiyuan. Sure enough, she saw that Zhan Shuiyuan didn't look well. Zhan Shuiyuan had always felt that Yushu only had the title of a female fortune-teller. In terms of family background, she was not on the stage. She was polite to Yushu in Taisher Library because of the rules. Outside of Taisher Library, she was more or less dismissive of Yushu. However, the events of the past few days clearly told her that Yushu was much more prestigious than she had imagined. This kind of disparity made it difficult for her to calm down. At this moment, it was as if there was a breath stuck in her throat, extremely sullen. The fact that Yushu had stayed in Huajin Garden made the people present ponder over it. Huajin Garden became empty and the Yulin royal guards retreated. The remaining nobles were less restrained and went their own ways. Lu Tan and Shui Rui watched as the emperor set off. They returned to the garden and talked on the way. "Last night, 8th brother invited me to the West Mountain to hunt. 12th brother and 13th brother wanted to go. Cousin, are you really not going with us?" Lu Tan asked the person beside him. Shui Rui shook his head and said, "You know that my hunting skills are not good. Shu doesn't even know how to ride a horse. It would be a disappointment if I went." Lu Tan's eyes flashed but he didn't say anything. He could more or less see the relationship between Shui Rui and Yushu. However, it was Shui Rui's matter. As his cousin, it was not his place to interfere. Therefore it was best not to ask. The two separated on the corridor and returned to their respective residences to change their travel clothes. As a prince, Lu Tan lived in a quiet courtyard in the north yard. As soon as he got off the bridge, he was greeted by servants in twos and threes. Some of them handed handkerchiefs, some of them fanned, and some of them brought news. "Your Highness, we have a rare guest." After entering the courtyard, Lu Tan was surprised to see Jing Chen standing in the living room. "Martial uncle? Why are you here? I thought you didn't come to worship the ancestors." Lu Tan only knew that Jing Chen disappeared a few days before the worship. The message he sent to the princess's mansion was not answered. He didn't see his name in the list of people who came with him. He didn't expect that Jing Chen would suddenly appear. Jing Chen was wearing a simple but elegant long gown. His hair was neatly combed behind his head with a slender wooden hairpin. Although the expression on his face was a little cold when he saw Lu Tan, he still revealed a little smile and said, "Lu Tan, I'm here. You don't know." Lu Tan invited him to sit down and asked a few more questions. Seeing that Jing Chen had no intention to explain, he changed the topic. "We are going to the enclosure later. If Martial Uncle has nothing to do, you can come with us. The scenery of the West Mountain is very good. There is a lot of game in the summer. You haven't been here before, right?" Jing Chen nodded and didn't refuse. "Then help me prepare a horse." "No problem. Martial Uncle, wait here. I'll go back to my room to change." Okay. It was not yet 9 o'clock. Yushu stood empty-handed at the entrance of the courtyard waiting for someone. Not long after, she saw Shui Rui's figure. He was followed by 2 attendants who carried a water bag and a bow and arrows. Yushu walked forward and looked behind him, asking, "Where's the horse?" "Last night, he used the horse to seduce her to stay." Shui Rui said, "It has been brought to the south gate. Let's go." "Well, why do you still have a bow and arrows?" "There are a lot of wild animals in the forest outside. If we encounter a leopard or tiger, we can use it to protect ourselves." Yushu stopped walking. Shui Rui turned his head and looked at her. He smiled and said, "Why? Are you afraid?" Yushu curled her lips. "I read my fortune before I left this morning. Today is not going well. Don't jinx me. If you scare me again, I'll go back to sleep." She turned around and walked back. Shui Rui saw this and quickly reached out to pull her. Hey, why can't I make a joke?" "Well, I brought the bow because I want to hunt some wild birds. Let's barbecue outside at noon." Yushu was pulled back by his strength. She turned her head and smiled. She pulled his sleeve and walked forward. "Barbecue? That's a good idea. Let's go." Shui Rui didn't care about her words. It was rare to have a chance to come out to play. He wanted her to be happy. They walked fast. After a while they were out of the west gate. A groom was already waiting on the road. He was leading 2 horses, one yellow and one white. Both were plump and strong and appeared to be in good spirits. When they arrived in front of her, Yushu looked at one and then at the other. She couldn't help but stretch out her hand to stroke the pure white horse with an eager expression. She turned her head and asked Shui Rui, "Which one should I ride?" When Shui Rui saw her eyes lit up, he knew that she had set her sights on his carriage. He smiled as he took the white horse from the coachman's hand and waved at her. Chapter 467. For a brave beginner like Yushu, riding a horse is not difficult. With a good horse and a guard who never leaves her side, she can trot on the horse in less than an hour. There is a long and winding road in the southwest of Huajin Garden, leading to the paddock in the West Hill. The road is flat and the sand is soft. Tall elm trees are planted on both sides of the road. They are verdant and lush in the summer. When riding a horse, the sun is on its head. Only the breeze brings warmth to people's faces. Shui Rui followed by Yushu's side. The 2 of them chatted and laughed as they ran. 2 attendants rode their horses and lagged behind them at a moderate distance. Yushu trotted for a distance before slowing down the horse's speed in a slightly jerky manner. She admired the pleasant scenery of the countryside. Stroking the neck of the docile white horse beneath her, she turned her head and grinned at Shui Rui. "Since I came to the capital last year, this is the first time I have come out to relax. Thanks to you, brother." Shui Rui knew Yushu's experiences after she came to Enling like the back of his hand, and when he heard this, he could only sigh in his heart that she had a hard life. When she first came here, she dragged along her weak brother and Jing Chen, who had lost his memory, and she was busy making a living. She set up a stall in the market square to tell fortunes, and she raised her family by herself. Later, she was persuaded by him to participate in the Dian examination. She was busy preparing for the exam. Then she met Jing Chen and left without saying goodbye. Because of this, she became enemies with the Ji family. Troubles came to her one after another. She had no time to sneak out to play. He had seen all of Yu Shu's sufferings with his own eyes. Sometimes he would break out in a cold sweat for this lonely woman. However, she did not complain or blame anyone. Instead, she became braver and braver. It was as if she had an inexhaustible spirit. She never regretted the past and would always look forward. She lived a real life which made him admire her. Shui Rui looked at Yu Shu and his eyes flickered. He said in a clear voice, "This is still the capital region. A place to have fun is not really free. If there's a chance in the future, I'll show you the various sceneries of the north and south of the Yangtze River. The grasslands beyond the Great Wall, the snow on Changbai Mountain, the mountains and the sea of clouds, the desert of the western frontier. It's so beautiful." Yu Shu was not blind, but when she saw Shui Rui's spirited expression when talking about these things, she couldn't help but be attracted by him. She rolled her eyes and teased, "From the way you talk, it sounds like you've been to these places before." Shui Rui raised his thick eyebrows and shook the yellow rattan horsewhip in his hand. "I've been there, but I didn't tour all of them. I wasn't able to enjoy myself." Yu Shu had a question in her heart for a long time. It was rare for her to talk about this. She took the opportunity to ask him, "I heard that you left Anling a few years ago. It's been 2 or 3 years since you left. Did you go sightseeing?" Shui Rui turned his head and looked at Yu Shu. The smile on his lips faded for some reason and he slowly said, Seeing his behavior, Yu Shu couldn't help but think of the rumor she heard from Xen Lu not long ago. Shui Rui fled Anling out of sadness because of the death of the 10th princess. Could it be that he really went to heal his feelings? Thinking of this, Yu Shu felt strange. She secretly looked at Shui Rui's face and muttered in her heart, 3 years ago, the 10th princess was only a little old. According to the ranking, she was at most the same age as the 9th prince, Lu Tan. At that time she was only 12 or 13 years old. Even if Shui Rui was only 16 or 17 years old, he couldn't have loved her so much, could he? But it was hard to say. Shui Rui's aunt was an imperial concubine in the palace. He was also very fond of the emperor and often walked around the palace when he was young. It was possible that he and the 10th princess were childhood sweethearts. Otherwise there was no arranged marriage. Why did Shui Rui, a good young man, stay empty for 2 or 3 years and delay it until now? The more Yu Shu thought about it, the more confused she became. On one hand, she didn't want Shui Rui to have other women in his heart. On the other hand, she couldn't figure out why he left the capital that year. Shui Rui didn't know Yu Shu's speculation. He looked into the distance and said to her, "We'll enter the hunting grounds if we go any further. Let's stop here." Yu Shu nodded and dismounted with him. When the 2 attendants behind them caught up, they walked to the river together. "Young master, drink some water." The younger of the 2 attendants untied the water bag and brought it to Shui Rui. Shui Rui took it, unscrewed the cork and handed it to Yu Shu. The latter smiled and looked up. She saw that the servant who handed her the water was looking at her and curled his lips, as if he was dissatisfied with her. Yu Shu's heart skipped a beat. She pretended not to see anything and drank a few mouthfuls of water. She casually asked Shui Rui, "Are these 2 servants of Huajin Garden, or did you bring them from the residence?" Shui Rui said, "Both of them are from the residence and have been with me for many years. Gui-san came from the supply house, and Hadaku is my wet nurse's son." He explained in detail and pointed them out to Yu Shu. The young man who was tying the horse was 3 to 5 years older than Shui Rui. He was Gui-san, and the one who handed her the water was called Hadaku. When Yu Shu heard Gui-san's name, she thought of the 2 attendants in Wangji Lu. She asked suspiciously, "Are Gui Qi and Gui Ba brothers with Gui-san?" Shui Rui turned his head and looked at the young man who was tying the horse under the tree. He said to her, "It's just that they have the same surname. Brothers are brothers, but they are not related by blood. It's not like you haven't been to the supply house." He changed the topic and asked, "By the way, how is the young master of the Bai family, the one you chose for Xiaoxiu? He is very obedient and sensible. Xiaoxiu learned to write from him and has improved a lot." Shui Rui suddenly mentioned Bai Ran, but Yu Shu didn't think too much about it. She looked at the river that was flowing slowly not far away, and her sharp eyes noticed 1 or 2 fish jumping in the river. "Sai, if I knew this would happen, I would have brought a fishing rod and fish basket. You know how to fish." Yu Shu said proudly, "Of course in the past, Halfway through his words he suddenly stopped. Shui Rui asked, "What do you want to say?" Yu Shu fell into a moment of reminiscence. She remembered the time when the merchant ship was robbed and they jumped into the river to escape. They survived in the forest by relying on her to catch fish. Hey, it's nothing. A hero doesn't talk about his past achievements. It's all in the past. Yu Shu tried to fool him and began to urge Shui Rui, "Aren't we going to hunt? Let's go, I'm hungry." Shui Rui noticed that she was hiding something, but he did not ask further. Instead he said, "Then you stay here and play in the water and look at the fish. I will take Hataku to the forest and come back as soon as possible. Don't run around." Yu Shu was not happy. "Why don't you take me? Don't you know that sitting and waiting to die is the most boring thing?" Listening to her nonsense, Shui Rui did not know whether to laugh or cry. He reached out and patted her head. "What are you talking about? If you are bored you can build a fire with Gui-san. You don't know how to shoot arrows. You will only cause trouble if you go." Yu Shu wanted to say that she knew how to use a slingshot, and that she was very accurate in killing birds, but she glanced at the longbow and arrows that Gui-san had brought along. It was a well-equipped weapon, so she was too embarrassed to say that she knew how to use it. "Well, you go then. Be careful." Yu Shu did not speak out of turn to remind Shui Rui about the leopard and the tiger. She was afraid that Shui Rui's jinx would turn out to be true. She had also calculated that the weather would be favorable for him today, so she did not worry too much. After Shui Rui left, Gui-san first cleared out a place for Yu Shu to sit at a shady spot by the river. Then he laid out a hemp mat and soft cushion before placing 2 plates of fresh fruits that were plucked from Huajian garden early in the morning. After that, they dutifully gathered the firewood around them and poured out the charcoal and other materials they had brought with them. Yu Shu wanted to help, but was politely stopped by someone. "Miss, go play with the water. I will do these." Yu Shu touched her nose and sat down not far away. She picked up a guava and started to nibble on it. She put one hand in the shallow water and splashed the water. It was cool. She had nothing to do here, but she did not know that on the other side a group of people was approaching the river. What bad luck. Fortunately we ran fast. Otherwise we would have died in the tiger's mouth. 8th Prince Lu Du patted his chest as he sat on his horse. He looked back frequently with a pale face. He was afraid that the white-fronted tiger lying on the hill would catch up with them. The 13th princess was sitting on the back of Lu Tan's horse. She grabbed her brother's waist with one hand. Hearing this she scratched Lu Du's face and teased, "8th brother is a coward. He said he would take me into the mountains to hunt the tiger. You ran fast just now." 8th prince looked embarrassed. He turned to look at the cold and calm Jing Chen beside him and could not help but drag him down. Jing Chen has been cultivating in the mountains for so many years. He is highly skilled in martial arts. He should not be afraid of the beast. Why did he run away when he saw the big tiger? Jing Chen glanced at him and said, "I saw you all running away. Why should I stay?" 15 minutes ago, they were still hunting in the western mountain enclosure. Lu Du led the way and arrived at the foot of a hill. Before they even got close, they looked up and saw a tiger the size of a small hill dozing off halfway up the hill. Lu Du was scared out of his wits. With a cry of alarm, he turned around and ran. The rest of them naturally turned around and followed him. Along the way there were quite a few servants who ran away. Coincidentally, they lost their way, so they got lost. Lu Tan was at a loss for words. The 13th princess giggled as she lay on Lu Tan's back. She had a charming and mischievous look on her face. She hadn't seen that big tiger with her own eyes, so she didn't know how terrifying it was. Lu Tan looked at the fork in the forest in front of them. He turned his head and asked Jing Chen, "Martial uncle, which direction should we go?" Jing Chen looked up at the sun and narrowed his eyes. He calculated in his sleeves and knew that the person he was looking for was in the southeast. He pointed to a path and said, "Go this way. There should be a river in front." Lu Du quickly said, Yes. We will know the way back once we find the river." Lu Tan then sent a servant to find a river in front of them. The group of people rode on horses and walked out of the forest. They were getting farther and farther away from the enclosure but closer to the river. Not long after, they saw the white stone beach and their field of vision suddenly widened. "Look, there's a river in front." The 13th princess cheered and was about to jump down from her horse when Lu Tan pulled her back. A servant knelt down and used his back as a tiptoe to help her down. Lu Du also dismounted and said, "We're tired. Let's rest here and wash our dirty faces. Let's get something to eat before we go back." Most of the princes loved to ride horses and hunt. They were very noble in the capital. When they went out to play they were more casual. They did not have to rinse their mouths with bird's nest or pick their teeth with shark's fin. The stone beach was not suitable for horses, so they all dismounted and walked on foot. The servants led the horses away and they strolled along the river bank. Jing Chen's eyesight was very good. He saw someone on the other side of the river from afar. When he looked closely, he was not sure if it was Yu Shu or not, so he started walking in that direction. He was so focused on the person on the other side that he did not notice the movement behind him. After walking for about 10 steps, he suddenly heard a frightening scream from behind. Ah! Jing Chen quickly turned his head and saw a golden figure slowly walking out from the woods. Its huge body shrouded everyone's hearts in fear. The white-fronted tiger they met in the hunting grounds had actually chased them all the way here. A woo! The tiger's roar struck the eardrums of everyone on the riverbank. Everyone's faces turned pale. The tiger was indeed extraordinarily large. Even an adult black bear would not be able to match it. It stretched out its 4 limbs and the fat on its body jiggled. It bared its sharp teeth and transparent saliva dripped down. The tiger was not afraid of humans at all. It must have gotten tired of eating birds and beasts deep in the mountains and came out for a change. Its cold gaze swept across the group of humans and it walked towards them step by step, as if it was choosing which one to eat first. Lu Gu was so scared that he almost peed his pants. His legs trembled and he could not even move, let alone run. 13 was so scared that he cried. He tightly held onto Lu Tan's arm and was pinched hard by him. He did not dare to make another sound. At this time, whoever made the first move would undoubtedly become the tiger's first target. Lu Tan was also nervous to the point where his nose was dripping with sweat. But he was more composed than Lu Du. He stared at the tiger's movements, and sized up the surrounding situation with his peripheral vision. His eyes turned cold and he calmly withdrew the gemstone ring on his index finger, and shot towards a direction. Ah! A servant who had been kneeling on the ground with his head in his hands jumped up. At the same time, the tiger turned its head and stared at him. Its 2 thick forelimbs tightened and contracted as it pounced at the servant. At the same time, Lu Tan pulled 13 back and shouted, "Martial uncle, quickly make your move." There was no need for him to say anything. The moment the tiger pounced at the servant, Jing Chen had already caught up. His movements were light as a feather, but his long leg brought with it a gust of wind as it struck at the tiger's back. Oh whoa! The tiger was unfazed. After being kicked away, its massive body trembled and it gave up on its prey. It turned towards the more threatening human Jing Chen, and stretched out its sharp claws to slap down. In the blink of an eye, the man and the tiger were engaged in a fierce battle. Jing Chen was good with swords, but he did not bring his sword with him on this trip. He was bare-handed, so he was at a disadvantage when facing a wild beast. Lu Tan, on the other hand, was very calm. Seeing that Jing Chen had entangled the tiger, he let go of 13 and ran to Lu Du, who was lying limply on the ground. He pulled the dagger from his waist, unsheathed it, and threw it at Jing Chen. "Martial uncle, take this." Jing Chen used the spirit crane flips the clouds to dodge the tiger's attack and caught the hilt. With a twist of his wrist, his aura suddenly changed as he faced the tiger and aimed for its life. However, because he was not used to using a sword, his thrust was slightly off the mark and stabbed the tiger's right ear. A woo! The single-eyed white-fronted tiger let out a pained roar. It keenly sensed the fatal danger and jumped back. As if it had turned into a spirit, it turned around and fled towards the other side of the river. Jing Chen, who was calm when he was fighting the tiger, suddenly changed his expression and chased after it with his sword. "Martial uncle, stop chasing." Seeing Jing Chen chasing the tiger, Lu Tan quickly called out to stop him. However, he saw Jing Chen's figure flying at lightning speed. In a blink of an eye, the man and the tiger were more than 100 feet away. Meanwhile, Yu Shu had eaten a few fresh fruits and was washing her hands by the river. She was shocked when she vaguely heard a roar from afar. "Gui-san, did you hear something?" Gui-san put down the metal rack in his hand and held onto the dagger at his waist. He stared into the distance and his expression changed. He took a few steps back and grabbed Yu Shu's arm before running towards the river bank. "Miss, let's go." Yu Shu looked back in confusion. Her sharp eyes saw water splashing in the middle of the river. Something was running towards her. Soon she saw clearly what it was and was shocked. She cursed in her heart. "Damn it, Shuirue, you jinxed it." Yu Shu wanted to cry but had no tears. She could only flee for her life with Gui-san. Unexpectedly, she saw Shuirue and the manservant returning from the forest in front of them with bows, arrows, and prey in their hands. Before they arrived in front of her, she had already shouted loudly, Chapter 468. Big brother, run for your life, the tiger is coming. As soon as Shui Rui came out of the woods, he saw Yu Shu shouting and running towards him. When he looked back, he knew what made her panic. A fierce tiger was running dozens of steps behind her. Its eyes flashed with a fierce red light, and behind the tiger was a man with a sword. Shui Rui's face changed, but he didn't retreat half a step. He immediately pulled the longbow in his hand and put an arrow on the bowstring. Just when Yu Shu ran to his side, his eyes flashed with cold light, and he shot a single eye at the tiger. Whoosh! Whoa! The left eye of the tiger was hit by the arrow and blood splashed out. It was in so much pain that it retracted its forelimbs, and its two hind legs moved a few steps forward. Just because of this pause, Jing Chen, who was chasing behind it, caught up with it, stepped on its back and pierced its head with a sword. Bang! The huge body of the tiger fell to the ground. Yu Shu suddenly turned around and grabbed onto Shui Rui's arm, yet Shui Rui pulled her back and pulled her behind him. Yu Shu was panting and half of her head popped out from behind him. She looked at the big tiger lying on the ground 7 or 8 steps away from them. Its huge body made people's scalp numb. Her teeth trembled a few times, and then she saw Jing Chen standing up from the tiger, looking straight at her with a pair of bright eyes. She was stunned for a moment and then she came back to her senses. She pulled Shui Rui's back and asked him in shock, "Are you dead?" Shui Rui glanced at the man and the tiger coldly. He raised his hand and put his arm around her shoulder, pulling her to his side and teased her, "Dead? Look at how scared you are. You ran faster than a rabbit just now." Yu Shu hit his chest and said angrily, "It's all because of you, Jinx." Shui Rui chuckled softly before turning to Jing Chen, who was standing nearby, and said, "Thank you, Daoist child, for lending a helping hand." Shui Rui was smart. Seeing the situation in front of him and the figures running over from afar, he had a suspicion in his heart. Before today he had not heard that Jing Chen was in Huajin Garden. Someone who was not supposed to be here was now right in front of him. The West Mountain enclosure was so vast that there was no end to it. It could only be said that someone had purposely run into them. If it wasn't for him, then it was for Yu Shu. Jing Chen's indifferent gaze swept past Shui Rui's face, and in the end, it descended onto the palm on Yu Shu's shoulder. Because the two of them were too intimate with each other, he felt slightly stuffy in his heart, and he instinctively wanted to silently chant the mind-cleansing incantation. He no longer needed to guard his Dao heart. "No need to thank me. You were the one who shot it just now. That's why I was able to act in time." Only then did Yu Shu notice that there was an arrow stuck in one of the tiger's eyes. Half of the arrowhead was pierced through, and the other half was exposed. Blood was flowing out of the eye. She opened her eyes and was puzzled. Such a big tiger, shouldn't it stay deep in the mountains? Why did it run out of the enclosure? She glanced at Jing Chen again and did not say anything. That night on the bridge, he had severed all ties with her and said that they were strangers. She did not want to use her warm face to stick to his cold buttocks. In next to no time, Lu Tan and the others who were on the other side of the river rushed over, and they heaved a sigh of relief when they saw the dead white forehead tiger on the ground before noticing Shui Rui, and they wiped off the cold sweat on their foreheads. "Your Highness, what happened?" Shui Rui let go of Yu Shu's shoulder and asked Lu Tan when he saw the group of people approaching. Lu Tan then told them about how they met the tiger in the mountains and got lost. Later on, they were targeted by the tiger and followed out. In the end, he said with a face full of relief, "Luckily we had Marshal Uncle with us. Otherwise, we would have died in the tiger's mouth today." Shui Rui furrowed his brows and looked at the few servants behind Lu Tan who were still in shock. He suddenly became suspicious, but he didn't show it on his face. He asked Lu Tan again, "Where are the others?" Lu Tan pointed at the river bank behind him and said, "8th brother and 13th sister are over there." Shui Rui looked at the river bank and asked, "Why isn't the 12th prince with you?" "No, he had a stomachache this morning, so he stayed in Huajin Garden." Shui Rui nodded and said no more. Seeing that they were out of danger, Lu Tan asked someone to bring the 8th prince and the others to the other side of the river. They gathered together. Yu Shu knew Lu Du, but it was the first time for her to see the 13th princess. The young girl was as cute as snow, but she was obviously frightened. Her face was pale as she held onto Lu Tan's arm. She closed her eyes and did not dare to look at the dead tiger on the ground. After such a thing happened, everyone's playfulness was gone from fright. Lu Tan and Shui Rui discussed and decided to leave a few servants to guard the tiger's carcass while they rode back to the garden to avoid being attacked by wild beasts again. The few horses on Lu Tan's side were so frightened by the tiger that they ran away, whereas the 4 horses on Shui Rui's side were tied to the tree properly. Thus, the two of them divided the horses. Lu Tan and the 13th princess rode on one horse, Lu Du and Jing Qin rode on the other horse respectively, while Shui Rui and Yu Shu shared the last horse. No one had any objections. Of course, there might be people who had objections, but they did not say it. Shui Rui got on the horse first and stretched out his arm to pull Yu Shu to the back of his horse. They had shared a ride before. That time, Yu Shu ran out of the city to look for Jing Qin, and Shui Rui found her in the middle of the night and brought her back. Compared to the stiffness at that time, Yu Shu was much more at ease now. She casually wrapped one arm around Shui Rui's waist and leaned against his straight back. She swayed with the magatama, which was quite comfortable. Shui Rui held the reins with both hands and smiled. Jing Qin was half a horse's length behind them. Looking at the two sitting next to each other on the horse's back, he felt that something was wrong, but he could not tell what it was. After a while, the fear in their hearts dissipated. Lu Du, who was scared to the point of wetting his pants not long ago, was now full of energy. He turned to Jing Qin and laughed. I didn't expect Jing Qin to be so skilled. That ferocious beast had been the king of the mountains for a long time. Now that you killed it, it must have been very regretful before it died. Ah. Jing Qin frowned slightly and thought, if it wasn't for that tiger hurting people first, he would not have killed it. Lu Du did not seem to notice that Jing Qin was not in a good mood. He still talked to him excitedly. The hanging eyes, white forehead tiger you killed is full of rare treasures. It has tiger skin, tiger bones, tiger guts, tiger whips. Ahem. Shui Rui coughed lightly and interrupted Lu Du's words, saying, tiger bones are good stuff. I have 2 jars of tiger bone wine in my Wangji Lu. The price I bought it for was not low. Lu Du also knew that he had said something he shouldn't have. There were still 2 girls present, so he smiled embarrassedly. He winked at Shui Rui and said, why don't the 2 of us join in and ask Jing Qin to buy all the bones of this tiger? We'll both go back to brew wine? He was thick-skinned. He knew that Jing Qin was on Lu Tan's side. Today, when this tiger was brought back to the capital and presented to the palace, the emperor would be very happy and reward him. How could he have a share? But it was a different story. When he went back to make tiger bone wine and send it to the palace, he would at least get a share. Hearing this, Shui Rui smiled at Lu Du, although he did not answer. His eyes seemed to see through Lu Du. Haha. Lu Du laughed dryly and found a way out for himself. If you are not willing to spend money, then forget it. Chapter 469. By the time Shui Rui, Lu Tan, and the others returned to Huajin Garden, it was already afternoon. Shui Rui brought Yu Shu to his residence and ordered the servants to prepare a meal for her. He then went to the east courtyard alone to look for Lu Tan. Lu Tan lived in a small lakeside building. When Shui Rui came downstairs, he met Jing Qin, who was coming out. The two looked at each other, nodded in greeting, and walked away. Cousin, you're here. Lu Tan had changed into a comfortable cotton robe and was drinking tea in the pavilion. He gestured for Shui Rui to sit opposite him and waved to the palace maids who were waiting on him. 2 of them obediently came forward to fan Shui Rui and pour him herbal tea. Shui Rui only glanced at the many eyes and ears in the pavilion, but didn't say anything to ask Lu Tan to leave. There's something fishy about what happened in the paddock today. Lu Tan's face darkened. He nodded and said, I thought about it carefully on the way back. There is indeed something fishy. Every year there are hunting teams patrolling the western mountain paddock. Whenever a ferocious beast appears, it is either hunted or chased deep into the mountains. The fierce tiger we encountered today was most likely lured out of the mountains by someone in advance. Shui Rui thought for a moment and said, according to what you said earlier, you met the tiger near Chioping Hill. The West Mountain paddock is so big and you happened to run into it. Moreover, it chased you all the way to the periphery before showing its head. This tiger is really thoughtful. Lu Tan narrowed his eyes. Cousin, are you saying that someone deliberately lured us to Chioping Hill and then lured the tiger to chase us? Shui Rui didn't answer and asked, who do you think it is? It's suspicious that 12th brother didn't travel with us, but he doesn't have the means to do so. 7th brother didn't come to worship the ancestors and is in the capital, but it's not impossible for him to reach Huajin Garden. 8th brother is a coward and would never do such a risky thing. Lu Tan analyzed them one by one. Although he didn't point them out, he already had a suspect in his words. Shui Rui laughed soundlessly and said in a low voice, it can't be Ning Wang. Lu Tan frowned and said with slight displeasure, why can't it be him? Shui Rui's dry and slender fingers gently tapped on the tea table. His eyes were not clear as he said, I have known him since I was 6 years old. It has been more than 10 years since then. I know very well what kind of person the seventh prince is. If the tiger was released by him today, your highness would not be able to sit here and talk to me in one piece. Hearing this, a flash of disapproval flashed across Lu Tan's face. He knew that compared to him, the son of an imperial consort who had been neglected for many years, Lu Hao, who had been favored by his imperial father since he was young, was indeed stronger than the other brothers in every aspect. But after the double sun meeting, he had successfully suppressed Lu Hao and felt that this imperial brother was not someone he couldn't deal with. He even had a faint feeling of contempt. In his view, Shui Rui's evaluation of Lu Hao was exaggerated. Then who does Biao Xiong think is behind this? Shui Rui raised his head to look at him, the corners of his mouth moving slightly. He said in a pure and kind voice, "Why don't you go investigate personally? Who is with us today? Who is it that got lost along the way? Why did the 12th prince suddenly have an upset stomach?" Shui Rui only pointed in a direction and did not have the slightest intention of overstepping his boundaries. Lu Tan admitted that with his current ability, he still could not order Shui Rui to do things for him. So he nodded at him reservedly, indicating that he would send people to investigate. After discussing business, Shui Rui took a few sips of the cold drink at Lu Tan's place and asked casually, "When did Daozi arrive at Huajin Garden? When did Daoist child arrive at Huajin Garden? I haven't seen him for the past few days." "I'm not sure about that. Martial uncle should have arrived earlier than us. He also refused to tell me. Maybe Imperial Father has other arrangements. You didn't mention it when we met yesterday. Why are you together today?" Shui Rui's expression was only curious. Lu Tan did not hide it from him. "When we came back this morning, Martial Uncle came to find me. I invited him to go hunting with me. Fortunately, he accompanied us. Otherwise, I don't know how many people would have been killed by the tiger." His tone was not overly afraid. Because even if Jing Chen did not help him today, he still had a way to save himself. It was just that he could not save the people around him. Shui Rui asked about the details that he wanted to know, and then he brushed it off and didn't continue this topic. The two cousins talked for a full hour in the water pavilion before Shui Rui left. Lu Tan looked in the direction of his departure. He turned around and glanced at the servants around him. He said in a cold voice, he said coldly, "Watch your mouths. Know what to remember and what not to remember." He had been back in the capital for less than half a year, and there were very few loyal servants around him. There were some things that could not be heard by others, but he deliberately let them hear it. In the future he could keep those who could be useful. Yu Shu stayed in Shui Rui's residence. It was much more relaxing than the small courtyard where the 6 people lived. There were people serving her with warm water and bathing. After bathing, food was served. When eating, there was a maid waving a fan at the side, which made Yu Shu think that she had returned to Wangji Tower. When Shui Rui came back, Yu Shu was lying on the rattan chair in the inner hall and dozing off. She did not hear the sound of him entering. Shui Rui didn't ask anyone to wake her up, and he walked over slowly. He took the fan from the servant girl and gestured for them to leave, then he sat down on the soft stool by Yu Shu's side. He had a smile on his face as he watched Yu Shu doze off with her head tilted to one side, and then he fanned her. Yu Shu was a light sleeper and woke up after a while. She narrowed her eyes and saw a handsome face. She was not very surprised. After staring for a while, she yawned and sat up. Rubbing her face, she asked him, "You're back. Have you eaten?" Shui Rui looked at her lazy movements and couldn't help but brush the messy hair at her temples. He put it behind her ear and smiled, "I ate at Wang Ye's. Don't sleep anymore. Accompany me and talk. Rest well at night. Tomorrow we will leave for Jing." Yu Shu instantly woke up. "Going back so soon?" "13th princess has been frightened. Ning Wang wants to take her back to Jing. It is not convenient for us to stay alone, so we will go with them." "Oh." Yu Shu's face was slightly regretful. She looked at Shui Rui and said honestly, "It's nothing else, just that I couldn't eat the wild game you hunted." "It's a pity?" Shui Rui smiled. "What's so hard about that? Didn't we bring back the pheasants and rabbits? We can roast them by the lake tonight." "Ah, that's good." Yu Shu became alert again. She crossed her legs and changed to a more comfortable sitting position. She took the fan from his hand and waved it between the two of them. She asked curiously, "Such a big tiger, how did it get to the edge of the enclosure? Didn't they say that vicious birds and fierce beasts usually hide among people?" Shui Rui calmly told her, "If it didn't run out by itself, it was lured out by someone." Yu Shu's expression was strange. Hearing his words, she had a guess. Someone had ill intentions and wanted to kill. As to whose life and why, she didn't need to think about the answer before she knew it. Dan had been celebrating for 14 years, and the princes had all come of age. The empress had no children and the Eastern Palace had no ruler. This was clearly a situation of the princes fighting for the throne. The princes that had a chance of succeeding the throne were fighting each other. Who didn't want who to die? Not to mention today's incident, Yu Shu had been implicated once before. That had been during the Shuangyang conference. She had been tricked by Shui Yun and had been tied up by Lu Hao's subordinates and locked in the basement. In the end, the tendons of Shui Yun's hands and feet had been cut. She had barely managed to keep her life. After the incident, Lu Hao had successfully framed the fourth prince and caused one person to be eliminated. The road to the fight for the throne was filled with corpses. Even though Shui Yun had the Heaven's Eye technique, she was still used as a raft. Could be seen how dangerous it was. Shui Rui saw that she had stopped fanning herself and calmly looked at her expression. He asked softly, "Are you afraid?" Yu Shu raised her head to look at the talented and handsome Shui Rui. Her eyes were bright and she couldn't help but ask herself, did Lu Tan want to be the emperor? This was undoubtedly nonsense. She asked in turn, why didn't Lu Tan want to be the emperor? Just based on Lu Tan's performance at the Shuangyang conference, she could see that the young ninth prince was not without ambition. Then, as Lu Tan's mother, the Shui family, would naturally be his support. Shui Rui, as the eldest son of the Shui family, would inherit the large family business in the future. All the situations indicated that Shui Rui would definitely participate in this fight for the throne. It wasn't that Yu Shu didn't understand this, but it was the first time she had thought so clearly and seen so clearly. "A Shu." Shui Rui called out softly at the right time and held Yu Shu's wrist that was holding the fan. There were some worries in his heart that he couldn't explain, but he still said to her gently, "Don't think too much." Yu Shu pulled back her thoughts and met Shui Rui's reassuring gaze. She thought, he doesn't know where she came from, so he probably doesn't know that she, as a modern person, can see through this fight for the throne. However, he had told her the truth about the tricks in the enclosure. It was probably to test her. If she understood in the future, she would regret talking to him. After all, the two of them had been together for a long time. Yu Shu had a bit of an advantage and understood Shui Rui's heart. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This guy only knew how to play tricks on her. Why didn't he think about what kind of person she was? She could only share blessings and not trials and tribulations? He had underestimated her too much. "I don't want it anymore." Yu Shu smiled and leaned back on the recliner. She gently pulled her wrist back and slowly swayed it. She thought to herself that it was fine. If he thought she was ignorant, then she would continue to pretend to be ignorant. When the day came that he wanted to talk, she would have a good talk with him. The next morning after breakfast, the group of people who had stayed in Huajin Garden left for the capital. When Yu Shu arrived, she squeezed into a carriage with a group of people. When she returned, she could even lie down. Shui Rui sat across from Yu Shu. He watched as she held half a book in her hands. Her body was slanted and she wanted to lie down, so he said, "Sit up straight. If you lie down and read, your eyes will fall out." Yu Shu made an "oh" sound and sat up reluctantly. Shui Rui liked to control her. If she didn't listen to his words, he would nag her the whole way. Last night, Shui Rui took her to the lakeside to eat some wild game. In a moment of happiness, they drank some wine. The two of them only went to bed in the middle of the night. Now that they woke up so early, she felt a bit tired. On the way, the carriage stopped several times. The return journey was faster than when they came. At dusk, they arrived at Enling City. They entered the city from the west gate and went their separate ways. Shui Rui sent Yu Shu to the door of her house and left. When Yu Shu entered the door, a servant ran to the backyard to report. When she entered the second door, Yun Do ran out to greet her. She went forward to take her luggage and said happily, "Miss, you're back. Madam and Tai Tai are talking about you." Yu Shu had been away from the capital for a few days. When she came back, she felt close to her maidservant. She went back to her room to wash her face, change her sweaty clothes, and went to the big room to meet the elders. In the central room, old Madam He was holding her grandson. Zhao Hui sat on the lower seat and patted Yu Shu's palm to talk. This mother-in-law and daughter-in-law were both kind people. They didn't ask about the ancestral worship ceremony, but only cared about how she was doing these days. Yu Shu also liked to listen to people's gentle words. She patiently talked to them for a while. Seeing that it was time for dinner, Zhao Hui urged people to prepare dinner. He Fangji and Yu Xiaoxiu hadn't returned yet. "Why isn't Godfather here at this time?" Yu Shu looked outside the door. "Old Madam," he answered. He said that there have been many patients in the medical center these days. He's too busy to leave and often only returns home after dark. If it wasn't for the fact that he still has a child at home, I'm afraid he would have to stay in the medical center at night. He Fangji's medical ethics were indescribable. Yu Shu said in admiration, Godfather has a kind and righteous heart. Although old madam he was dissatisfied with her son spending all day in the medical center and not at home, she was satisfied with her grandson. Hearing Yu Shu's praise, she beamed with joy. Zhao Hui pulled Yu Shu's hand and said, This is because of the plaque that the emperor bestowed. When your father first came here, no one believed in him. These days he has accumulated virtue in medicine and his reputation has become more and more famous. I didn't have time to tell you, but 2 days ago, someone from the general's mansion invited him to come and see a doctor. With this, He Fangji led Yu Xiaoxiu home. Sister, you're back. Before entering the door, she heard the sound first. Yu Shu turned her head and saw Yu Xiaoxiu come in like a gust of wind. Yu Shu smiled and pulled Yu Xiaoxiu to the other side to sit down, giving the seat to He Fangji who came in later. Why did you only finish school now? Did you run off to play? Yu Xiaoxiu scratched his head and turned to look at He Fangji. He Fangji explained for him, No, this child is very obedient. He came to the medical center early after school to help me. Yu Shu's nose twitched. Sure enough, she smelled the smell of medicinal herbs on Yu Xiaoxiu's body. The family sat at the table and had a reunion dinner. They talked and laughed and it was livelier than usual. At night, Yu Shu was sitting at the table reviewing the homework of Taisher Shuyuan when she heard Yu Xiaoxiu knock on the door. Sister, I want to talk to you. Come in. Yu Xiaoxiu pushed the door open and walked to Yu Shu's side. There was a trace of hesitation on his gentle face. Can I ask you a favor? Yu Shu put down her book and turned around. She put her arm on the back of the chair and smiled. Say it. It's Hu Tian. Yu Xiaoxiu frowned. He hasn't been to school for a few days. Mu Xiu, I went to his house yesterday and saw that he has lost a lot of weight. He told me that half a month ago, his mother took him to the great e-shop to have his fortune read. A teacher said that he would have a bloody calamity, so his mother locked him up at home and didn't allow him to go out. She even said that she would hire a teacher to teach him, so that he wouldn't be allowed to study at Baichuan Shuyuan anymore. Yu Shu didn't find it strange. The Hu family was a powerful and wealthy family. Hu Tiana was like a precious baby to the young master. How could his mother allow anything to happen to him? In order to avoid trouble, she wouldn't let him go to school. The Hu family couldn't afford to hire a few teachers. Yu Xiaoxiu continued, but Hu Tian didn't believe it. But Hu Tian doesn't believe it. He said that the teachers in the e-shop are all liars. They made up lies to fool his mother. Sister, I know you're powerful. Can you read his fortune and see if he's going to have a bloody calamity? Don't let him lose the chance to go to the library just because of a lie. Yu Shu raised her eyebrows and said, I can read his fortune, but he doesn't believe the teachers in the great e-shop. Does he only believe me? Yu Xiaoxiu hurriedly said, Why wouldn't he believe you? Sister, you're a fortune teller. Yu Shu wanted to say that the title of fortune teller didn't match with that of a fortune teller. But when she saw Yu Xiaoxiu's proud face, she couldn't bear to reject his request. She raised her hand and patted his head, saying, Chapter 470. Yu Xiaoxiu was well prepared. He showed Hu Tianer's horoscope to Yu Shu and waited for her to do the fortune-telling. He wasn't sure how the fortune-tellers in the shop did it, but he had seen his sister do it before. She would always draw some strange symbols on a piece of paper, and she would be able to predict when he would need to bring an umbrella, when it would be sunny, and when he would lose something. His sister could even predict the bumps in the road ahead of time. It was really amazing. Yu Shu spread the paper and turned to Yu Xiaoxiu. Don't just stand there, I don't know how many strokes I need to do. Go outside and find Yundo. Don't ask her to get me hot water to wash my feet, just get me a basin of water. Yu Xiaoxiu did as he was told and she picked up the pen to do the fortune-telling. Hu Tianer's horoscope was very good with all 5 elements. He looked like a person with good fortune. Yu Shu originally planned to figure out the child's misfortune for the next half a month, but she did not expect to bump into the misfortune the day after tomorrow. The fortune-teller for Hu Tianer was not lying, but he was not accurate enough. The child was indeed going to face a bloody disaster. To be precise, it was a man-made disaster. Coincidentally, Yu Shu had just started to organize the case records of the Supreme Court. She had all the big and small disasters in her hands, and the first one she started to analyze were the cases of assault and injury. In her law of misfortune, every incident could be represented by numbers and symbols. She stared at the assailants. Initially, she wanted to use the names of the assailants as the result of her divination. As long as she knew the numbers and symbols represented by each surname, she could deduce the surname of the assailant from the victim's horoscope. This way it would be easier to guard against them. However, it was easy to imagine, but when she actually tried to calculate, she realized that it was ridiculously difficult. Not to mention that there were many surnames in this world, people with the same surname might not come from the same family. As she calculated, she became confused. Fortunately, she had a flash of inspiration. She remembered that people did not only depend on their surnames, but also their zodiac signs. There were a total of 12 branches of the earth. This was the fate that one was born with. It matched the Yishu in her divination. It was like pushing a boat with the current. Within 2 days, she successfully obtained the value of 3 branches of the earth. Later, she was delayed by the ancestral worship, so she temporarily put it aside. She was now holding the result of Hu Tian'er's horoscope. Compared to the value she obtained before, she could not say she was 100% sure, but she was 80% sure that Hu Tian'er's so-called bloody disaster was caused by a person named Xiao Hu. Since it was a man-made disaster, it was definitely not an accident. There were many disputes in big houses. For a family like Hu Tian'er's, it was normal for 1 or 2 people to be jealous of him. Yushu had never liked to meddle in other people's business, especially when it came to other people's family. However, Hu Tian'er was very loyal to Yu Xiaoxiu. Previously, when Yu Xiaoxiu was pushed off the horse by Shui Wenjia at Baichuan Academy, he was the one who impatiently sent him back home. Now that she knew that the child was going to suffer, how could she not remind him? Yushu put aside the paper in her hand and opened the drawer. She picked out a light green piece of shuetao paper. This time she used a different brush. After some deliberation, she wrote a letter. Finally, she signed it with her operator's seal. After that, she sealed the envelope with wax. Yushu turned her head and saw Yu Xiaoxiu coming in with a basin. She waved at him with a gentle expression. "Xiaoxiu, come over here." "Sister, are you done calculating?" Yu Xiaoxiu's eyes were filled with anticipation. Nodding, Yushu passed the letter to him. She reminded him, "Tomorrow, go to Hu Tian'er's house. Don't talk nonsense with him. Think of a way to hand this letter to Madame Hu." Yu Xiaoxiu immediately asked worriedly, "Is Tian'er all right?" "Sister, what did you say in the letter?" Yushu patted his head and said, "Don't ask. It's the adult's business. Remember to hand the letter to his mother. Don't open it in private. Otherwise, don't come to me crying when something happens to Hu Tian'er." Yu Xiaoxiu nodded hurriedly and put the letter away in case he forgot it tomorrow. Yushu sent Yu Xiaoxiu back to sleep. She was tired from the long journey during the day, so she washed up and went to bed early. The next day, Yushu went to the Wangji restaurant. Before she left, she put the crystal beads made by Old Man Su in the Feng Shui pond. After 7 days, she would be able to see whether it was good or bad. Shui Rui was not around. There were not many customers in the restaurant in the morning. Yushu entered from the main entrance and called out to Lin Fu, who was sitting behind the counter, weighing the silver pieces. She asked him to continue with his work and entered the backyard alone. Yushu did not go back to her room. She went straight to the 3rd floor and was anxious to see her results. Walking into the courtyard, Yushu saw the scene in the corner of the balcony. She thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. In just 7 days, she almost couldn't recognize the geomancy pool she made. It was less than 3 feet away from the pool, but it seemed to have become a world of its own. The colorful cobblestones had small clusters of fresh green sprouts, and the pot of autumn grass had actually bloomed ahead of time. The edge of the pool was surrounded by a thin circle of green moss. Yushu blinked a few times and recognized that the black and shiny water tank under the sun was the gray fish tank she asked for from the kitchen. She hesitated for a few steps and walked closer to look down. This time her eyeballs almost fell out. The crystal stones at the bottom of the pool were like transparent bubbles, flashing with an enchanting luster. The 4 colors blurred one's vision, making one feel as if they were in a dream. Was this the crystal stone she bought from the sea merchant? How could it be so beautiful? Yushu squatted on the edge of the pond and looked at it for a while. Hearing the call behind her, she woke up. "Ah, miss, you are back." It was Xiaodai. Yushu squatted and turned her head. She saw the small bucket in her hand and a slender fence hanging on her waist. Thinking of what Xiaodai told her before she left, she asked, "Do you want to change the water?" Xiaodai said sweetly, "The water has just been changed. Just add this half a bucket." Yushu was a little excited. She moved aside and asked her to pour the spring water used to make tea in Wangji building into the pond. Then she couldn't wait to take the fence that Xiao Dai used to change the water. She reached into the fish tank and scooped up a few beads. She wiped the water on the bottom of her clothes and held it in her palm. In an instant, the crystal beads attracted all her attention. Xiao Dai exclaimed in admiration, "I don't know what method Miss is using, but Sister Xiao Qing and I would come up every day to take care of the gemstones and pearls in the pool. We actually feel that they are brighter every day. When the sun shines at noon, it hurts my eyes to look at the pool a few more times." Yushu grinned happily. Not to mention these two maids, it was also her first time trying to use feng shui to raise things. As for such an obvious magical effect, she didn't dare to think about it. Judging from the appearance alone, the crystal beads in this pond were better than ordinary gemstones. The feeling of holding them was refreshing, which undoubtedly helped her raise Reiki. Yushu rubbed the round crystal beads in her palm and asked Xiao Dai, "I asked you and Xiao Qing to weave the rope. Have you made it?" Old Man Su suggested that she use gold and silver thread to string these beads. When she left in a hurry, she left an ingot of silver for them so that they could think about it when they had time. "I was about to tell you that Sister Xiaoqing is best at this. She has made several styles and is waiting for you to choose." Yushu said with a smile, "You are so good at doing things. I will reward you later." After saying that, she asked her to go downstairs to find a clean plate. She took out the crystal beads in the pond and separated them into yellow and white ones, leaving the purple and pink ones untouched. Xiaoqing was very skillful. When Yushu got the rope she made, she thought it was a chain made of real gold and silver at first glance. There was a single gold flower rope with a yellow crystal bead strung on it, which was bright and beautiful. There was a single silver flower rope with a white crystal bead strung on it, which was like condensed dew. "Miss, is it too simple to tie a knot like this? Do you want me to add a pendant and twist it in a fancy way?" "No need. This is good." Natural and unadorned, this was true beauty. Yushu took the two bracelets that Xiaoqing tied and slowly put them on her wrists. The crystal was close to her pulse and it was slightly cold. It seemed to have dissipated the heat around her body. She fiddled with the two sides with love. In the end, she left the yellow crystal bracelet on her wrist and took off the white one. She still remembered that her friend who opened a shop called Story of the Stone said that white crystal could eliminate distracting thoughts, calm the mind and nourish the brain. And yellow crystal could bring fortune to people. "Xiao Dai, you go. There are a few sandalwood boxes on top of my bookshelf. Bring me a smaller one." When Xiao Dai wiped the box clean and brought it over, Yushu put the white crystal bracelet inside and closed it. Xiao Dai asked with a smile, "Miss, are you going to give it to the young master?" Yushu shook her head and put the box aside. She said, "This water essence stone is suitable for women to wear. Have you seen any man who likes shiny stones? If I give it to your young master, he will think that I am making fun of him." Actually, she had only said half of what she wanted to say. It was not difficult for her to raise these crystals. After all, she did not spend much effort on them. They were toys that she used to amass money. If she really wanted to give them to Shuirui, she would at least want them to be unique. For example, the century-old mahogany root. Yushu touched her chin and looked thoughtfully at the sandalwood box on the table. The next day there was an astrology lecture by Sima Kue. Yushu went to Taisha Library in the morning and saw Xan Lu. Before she took out the box from the bookcase, she saw Xan Lu coming out with an invitation full of pine fragrance. Xan Lu handed it to her and said with surprise, "Lotus Room, it will be my 15th birthday in 3 days. My father and mother are going to hold a ceremony for me. You must come." Yushu then closed the box and took the invitation empty-handed. She opened it and felt a little strange. She knew that in ancient times, women were considered to be of marriageable age at the age of 15. From then on, they could talk about marriage. Girls from rich families would also hold banquets and ceremonies. However, she had never experienced this kind of thing. "You are already 15. Yushu murmured. She looked at Xen Lu and reached out to measure her height, which just reached the tip of her nose. "I thought you were 13 at most." "You are only 13. Xen Lu angrily slapped her hand away and looked up at Yushu's height. Her face fell and she said with no confidence, "So what if you are tall?" Yushu raised her eyebrows and smiled. She did not argue with her. She just patted her head condescendingly and walked towards Sima Kue, who had just appeared not far away with the bookcase under her arm. Xen Lu stood there with a red face and whispered, "You just like to bully people. But I owe you, so I like to get close to you." Chapter 471. Although Xan Lu formally invited Yushu to attend her hairpin ceremony, because Yushu was not from an aristocratic family, there was no need to specially prepare a formal congratulatory gift. Coincidentally, she planned to give her the white crystal bracelet in her hand, so he simply saved it for that day. After the astrology class, Yushu stayed in Tibet until noon and then went home. During lunch, she heard from Zhao Hui that the tailor would deliver clothes today. Midsummer was approaching, but Yushu was still wearing the 2 unlined clothes from a month ago. She did not care about herself, and Zhao Hui could not take care of her because she was in labor. It was not easy for her to get out of confinement, so she was busy picking out the materials and making 2 new sets of clothes for everyone in the family. Even the servants and maids got a few rulers. After lunch, Zhao Hui left Xiao Chuan to the wet nurse and took Yushu back to the room to try on the clothes. She wore a pomegranate long skirt with sleeves and a pair of primrose yellow short summer pants. They all fit her very well. Yushu's face was not considered beautiful, but her figure was rare and graceful. She was still in the age of puberty and she was even taller than Zhao Hui. Not 1 in 10 girls could be picked out. She was born with a clothes rack and could hold up both men's and women's dresses. She went to the Taisher library and saw many children of aristocratic families wearing brocade clothes. She touched the materials on them. Although they were not as good as those silk jade, they were always light and comfortable. The needlework on them was excellent, which showed that Zhao Hui had put in a lot of effort. Our Xiao Yu is growing more and more decent. Zhao Hui adjusted Yushu's belt in front of her. She turned her head to look at the person in the mirror with joy in her eyes. She touched her back lovingly and said, "I found another craftsman to make 2 new sets of jewelry, using the box of pearls you gave me last time. They will be delivered in 2 days. When you go out later, don't dress too casually. After all, you are a female teacher and people will laugh at you for being ugly." Yushu hugged her shoulders and rubbed against her. She murmured, "Mother is so good to me. But don't be so tired. I am Teacher E, not a rich lady. I don't need to buy new clothes and jewelry all day long. It is a waste of money." Zhao Hui was in charge of the family, so she didn't have much money. He Fangji's clinic had only been open for a few months, and she had just made some money. Zhao Hui probably used the dowry she got that day to cover the cost of making clothes. She wanted to help Zhao Hui with her household expenses, but unfortunately she didn't have much spare money on hand. She had to repair the house and buy stones, so she really couldn't afford to spend it. Even if she gave the gold and silver in the storeroom to Zhao Hui, she wouldn't use it. She only said that she would keep it for her in the future. Zhao Hui hugged Yushu and said softly, "Who said you are not a miss? Aren't you our family's miss?" After the mother and daughter were intimate for a while, they heard a message from the front yard. Someone came to the door with a gift. It was for Yushu. "Who is it?" Yushu asked through the door. The person outside said in a strange tone, "It is from the princess residence." Yushu was puzzled. She didn't have a friendship with any princess. When Zhao Hui heard it, she hurriedly urged Yushu to go out and have a look. She didn't even change her clothes and went to the front with Yun Do. When they arrived at the front yard, Yushu saw the person in the living room. She was very surprised. She still remembered the young guard in front of her. He was one of the people she saw in the princess residence when she and Shui Yun were kidnapped. It was no wonder that Yushu didn't think that the princess residence was related to Jing Chen. It was just that after Jing Chen made such a heartless decision, how could she think that he would take the initiative to have anything to do with her? "Miss you." The imperial bodyguard, Gao Qi, cupped his hands and bowed to Yushu. He pointed to a 2-foot-tall porcelain jar on the table and explained the purpose of his visit. "This is the bone of the tiger that the master killed in Huajin Garden. He brought it to Mississippi." Yushu frowned inwardly and was confused. Why did Jing Chen give me the tiger bone? Didn't they no longer interact with each other? She thought about it for a while but couldn't figure it out. She didn't know what Jing Chen's intention was, so she said to the imperial bodyguard, "I don't deserve it. You can take it back." Gao Qi saw that Yushu had rejected him just as his young master had said, so he smiled bitterly. "Miss, don't make things difficult for me. How could I go against my master's orders? If you don't want to accept it, you can return it later." Yushu's eyes flashed and she looked at him coldly. "I've never heard of forcefully giving a gift. I don't have the time to run errands. You can either take it back to the princess residence or throw it out." She pointed at the jar of tiger bone and gestured in the direction of the main entrance with an unfriendly expression on her face. When Gao Qi saw this, he had no choice but to pick up the jar and walk away hesitantly. He didn't say anything else. Yushu was too lazy to ask. That day, when Jing Chen broke off all ties with her, she said everything she needed to say and tried to persuade him to stay, but he still insisted on ending the past with her. No matter how many difficulties he had, the words he said were like water that had been poured out. Today he was happy and came to provoke her again. Should she accompany him and sing along? After driving away the imperial bodyguard from the princess residence, Yu Shu returned to the backyard and vaguely explained to Zhao Hui. She then turned her head and put this matter to the back of her mind. She concentrated on calculating the Supreme Court's records in her hands. She still had 7 or 8 subordinates that she hadn't correctly chosen regarding the crime of murder and wounding. Back to Gao Qi, he carried the things back to the princess residence and reported to Jing Chen. He described Yu Shu's every word and action, paying attention to Jing Chen's expression, but he didn't see any change. It was hard to understand. Just leave it. Jing Chen glanced at the jar in Gao Qi's hand and didn't blame him. Gao Qi excused himself and met Shui Yun, who had been pushed back outside the building. He bowed his head to greet her. Young Mississippi Shui Yun was sitting on a wooden wheel. She was very thin and had just come back from sunbathing. Her complexion was good. She looked at Gao Qi and smiled faintly. She asked the maidservant behind her to stop and asked him, "Where did you go?" Gao Qi turned his head to look upstairs. Seeing that there was no one there, he turned to Shui Yun and whispered, "Young master told me to go to the west of the city to deliver something to Miss Yu." Shui Yun raised her eyebrows and her eyes became slightly cold. "Oh, what did you deliver?" "The tiger bone. It's a fierce tiger that young master killed in Huajin Garden and brought it to the palace. The emperor left the entire tiger skin and rewarded the tiger bone to young master." "Did Miss Yu accept it?" "She didn't. I just took it back." Shui Yun nodded. "Bodyguard Gao, go back to work." Gao Qi responded and hurriedly left. Shui Yun had someone push her in and saw Jing Chen sitting downstairs. There was a white jar on the table next to him. The wooden wheel stopped in front of Jing Chen and Shui Yun signaled for the maidservant to go out. "Senior brother, I heard that you sent someone to find Miss Yu?" Jing Chen didn't know how long he had been holding a cup of cold tea in his hand. He seemed to hear her call and came back to his senses. He looked up at her and said indifferently, "What, can't I find her?" Shui Yun's eyes dimmed. 2 days ago, when Jing Chen returned to the capital, he not only brought the good news of the Fate Breaker, but also the truth that her father and several martial uncles had concealed. It turned out that the elder's unwavering Dao heart was just a pretense to restrain Jing Chen. "I know that senior brother resents me for forcing you to break off relations with Miss Yu that day. I also feel very guilty. However, I still want to remind senior brother that although you found the whereabouts of the Fate Breaker, you can't be at ease as long as you don't break the fate. After all, the lives of the masters and martial uncles still need to be saved by you. The fate of the Great Han dynasty is also tied to you. As for the matter of reconciling with Miss Yu, it's better to wait until you break the fate. At that time, I will personally apologize to Miss Yu on your behalf and ask for her forgiveness." Jing Chen saw that her face was full of remorse, but his expression didn't change. Because of the great teacher's warning, although he told Shui Yun a part of the matter about the Fate Breaker, he didn't tell her that Xiaoyu was the person he was looking for. Therefore, his junior sister only knew that the martial uncles had deceived him and firmly protected his Dao heart, causing him to have no desires for all these years. However, she didn't know that he had to marry Xiaoyu to break the fate. Shui Yun saw that Jing Chen didn't speak, and her beautiful face became more and more bitter. "Senior brother, you don't believe me, so you won't tell me who the Fate Breaker is? If I don't tell you, are you going to lie about knowing her secret to threaten me again?" Jing Chen asked. After all these days, he still felt a little angry when he thought about it. A few months ago, Shui Yun noticed that he had developed feelings for Yu Shu, so she claimed that she wanted to cut off his feelings. At that time, she said that she discovered a big secret of Yu Shu, and that if she said it, she would be consigned to eternal damnation. He believed that it was true, but after several times using the Heavenly Book of Chaos, he found that Shui Yun was simply lying to him. "Last time you said that she was a lonely soul reincarnated. This time, are you going to tell me that she is some kind of demon?" Jing Chen's handsome face, which had always been indifferent, showed a rare trace of mockery. "I didn't lie to you." Shui Yun suddenly became excited. She raised her head and refuted, "Senior brother, you know that I was born with the heart of Qiqiao Linglong. I will never misjudge people. No one in the entire Mount Longhu can compare to me. Miss Yu doesn't look like someone who will live a long life, but she can stay by your side safely for so long. Don't you think it's strange?" She is not a person of this land. If it's not a lonely soul reincarnated, then what is it? Jing Qin said calmly, if it's not that you miscalculated, then is it that I used the heavenly book of chaos wrong? Shui Yun, you are talented, but I am stronger than you. Although I am only proficient in the human chapter and the national chapter of Master's heavenly book of chaos, when I succeed in my divination, I have an 80% accuracy. Your heart of Qiqiao Linglong is not the right path. 60% accuracy is already the best. He paused and then said, what's more, there are hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the capital. She is in the Imperial Historian's library and has been in and out of the Celestial Commissioner's office. If there is really something wrong, will no one see it? Shui Yun's mood was in a mess. Her hand on the armrest was half-clenched weakly and she said in a low voice, how would I know what happened? Her fate has actually changed. Whether you believe it or not, I definitely did not lie to you about this matter. Then she took a deep breath and stared at Jing Chen saying, Senior brother, listen to me. The important matter is important. There is no harm in talking about love affairs later. Jing Chen reached out and gently pushed aside the wheelchair in front of him. He stood up and walked upstairs. You don't need to worry about my matters. Chapter 472. 2 days later, Shui Rui sent Lao Chui to deliver 2 pots of freshly bloomed jean to Yu Shu. There was also a letter, saying that he was busy these days and couldn't get away, so he couldn't go to Wangji Building to meet him. He asked her to send someone to the Shui mansion to deliver an invitation. Yu Shu guessed that he suddenly became busy because of what happened in Huajin Garden. She asked Lao Chui to tell him to be careful of villains. Early in the morning, Yu Shu was about to go to Taisher Library for the morning class. When she went out with Yu Xiaoxiu, she saw a soft sedan stopped at the gate of her house. There was a maid and an old woman standing beside the sedan. They were dressed in new clothes. Behind them, there were 2 servants holding several heavy gift boxes. Then the old woman opened the sedan door and lifted the curtain. A woman in her 30s came out. She looked dignified and elegant. Obviously she was from an official family. When Yu Shu was wondering who this person was, she heard Yu Xiaoxiu say in surprise, Mrs. Hu. Yu Shu then knew who this person was. She should be the only daughter of Guo Huaiyan, the minister of the Supreme Court. Mrs. Hu raised her head and saw the pair of siblings standing on the doorstep. She smiled and walked up with the old woman's hand. She said in a friendly tone, Fortunately I came early. Otherwise I would have missed you. Xiaoxiu, is this your sister? Yu Xiaoxiu nodded blankly. He couldn't figure out why Hu Tianer's mother came to his house. Since Yu Shu knew who this person was, she first saluted and said, Hello, Mrs. Hu. Thank you for taking care of my brother in the school. This Mrs. Hu was married to Assistant Minister Hu of the Ministry of Rights. She was a rank 4 official. Even a female fortune teller like her had to be polite when she saw her. You Swansea, don't be so courteous. Madame Hu gently held Yu Shu's hand and stopped her from bowing. She said softly, I am here today to thank you. Can I take up some of your time and talk inside? Yu Shu thought that the secret letter she asked Yu Xiaoxiu to bring to Madame Hu a few days ago had taken effect. She turned sideways and invited him in. She stayed 2 steps behind and asked Lu Zhongxian to send Yu Xiaoxiu to school. They entered the room, sat down and served tea. Before Madame Hu took a sip of the tea, she straightened her body and bowed to Yu Shu. Thank you, Yu Swansea, for telling me the truth and sparing my son a great calamity. I'm very grateful. Yu Shu hastily stepped forward to help her up. Mrs. Hu is too serious, she said. It was that child Xiaoxiu who asked me, she said. It was only because of that child Xiaoxiu who asked me that I was meddlesome enough to help your son. To be honest, if Xiaoxiu and Tianer didn't study together and have a good relationship, I wouldn't have interfered in your family's business. That day she divined that Hu Tianer would encounter a bloody disaster and that the murderer was a man named Xiao Hu. She wrote a letter and asked Yu Xiaoxiu to give it to Madame Hu. She told Madame Hu all these. In order to avoid Madame Hu's disapproval, she even stamped her personal seal on the letter. It seemed to be a simple task, but in fact it was risky. If Madame Hu trusted her, it would be best for her to take precautions. If Madame Hu didn't trust her and something happened to Hu Tianer, she might take the letter and trust her. Madame Hu, a woman who lived in the house, had the most unnecessary thoughts. After the matter was over, how could she not think about it carefully? She knew that she owed Yu Shu a big favor, so she condescendingly came to visit her in person. Of course, this was only one of the reasons. The other reason was that she took advantage of the situation and got rid of a pregnant and restless concubine in the backyard. Therefore she was even more grateful to Yushu. The process was full of twists and turns. When Madame Hu saw Yushu coming to pull her, she took the opportunity to hold her hand. They sat side by side on the short couch. She took out a handkerchief to wipe the tears from her eyes and said to Yushu, "If I had known that you Swansea was so capable, I might have been able to sleep more peacefully. I might as well say something out of anger. Those aristocratic families in the capital are very useful. If I really ask them to do something for my son, none of them will tell me the truth. They will either avoid the topic or be vague. I'm afraid that I will say something wrong and ruin their reputation." Yushu finally understood. She was also curious before. With Hu Tianer's family background and Lord Gui's reputation, why couldn't they find a few De masters to look at his grandson? Why did they have to be so timid and keep Hu Tianer at home? It turned out that she thought they were stupid. It was precisely because of Hu Tianer's precious life that others didn't dare to make a judgment. They were afraid that if they said something wrong, the two families would hold a grudge against them. After all, it was difficult to be accurate. The Luyao technique that Taoish Qingzheng passed on to her was already a unique skill. If she used it to the extreme, she would only be 60% accurate. If it weren't for the fact that her time of calamity law was extremely accurate, she wouldn't have made such a conclusion. Unfortunately, the range of her time of calamity law was limited. Otherwise, all the De masters in the city of Anling combined, their skills wouldn't be as good as the one in her hand. At this moment, Yushu felt like she was guarding a gold mine, but she could only dig until the entrance. She had no choice but to dig bit by bit. This time Madame Hu was also angry. She started to complain about those aristocratic families in front of Yushu. It wasn't that she liked to gossip, but she was afraid. On the contrary, Yushu didn't pretend to be polite when faced with her straightforward words. She comforted her with a gentle voice and said, "Madam, don't overpraise me. In terms of ability, I may not be better than the masters of the aristocratic families. I just want you to be on guard as much as possible. If I really can't predict correctly, I can only blame myself for not being good enough." Although Yushu said it modestly, she didn't intend to hide her ability. She still looked indifferent. Madame Hu was a meticulous person. She looked at Yushu up and down and believed that she was really capable. Few people in the city of Anling could predict the fatal disaster accurately. Before Madame Hu got married, she was the only daughter in her family. Her father once wanted her to be a cook, so he raised her as a man for several years. She could be regarded as a knowledgeable woman. Therefore, she didn't think that Yushu was poor and intended to make friends with her. "I heard that Swansea has entered the Taisher library to study. Not long ago, he was lucky enough to go to the emperor's mausoleum to worship his ancestors. If he can become an official in the future, he will have a bright future. He will be better than us who have to rely on the servants in the inner chamber. I will have to work for you in the future. You must accept this gift." As Madame Hu spoke, she asked her maid to ask the servants in the yard to bring the gifts in. She put them on the table one by one and gave the list to Yushu. Although Yushu loved money, she didn't want to accept Madame Hu's gift. This was what Yu Xiaoxiu asked her to do. She would help him if she could. It was not a big deal for her to accept the gift. Madame Hu probably saw her reluctance on her face. She smiled in her heart. She stood up and opened the boxes, saying, "I was afraid that you wouldn't like gold and silver, so I specially selected them. This box is tea made by my father, and this box is rouge and face powder made by the palace. These two are just my sincerity. In addition, there is a piece of century-old peach wood root and a piece of long-ting wood. I think you will need them." An idea came to Yushu. She walked to the table and stared at the dark golden wood in a big box. It was the same color as what she saw in the list of rare objects. Her eyes suddenly brightened. Chapter 473. After sending Mrs. Hu away, Yushu turned around and put the gifts she sent into her room. Then she went out of the door happily. With the century-old mahogany root, the thing that she had wanted to give to Shui Rui would finally have a chance. Today was Fang Zijing's morning class, so Yushu arrived a little late. She slipped into Su Shui Tang through the back door. As usual, Fang Zijing was wearing a loose robe that did not fit him. His thin body was stuck in a spacious armchair, and his left hand was playing with a thin and long fate stick. He was explaining a chapter of Qimen Yaoshu. His withered eyelids were drooping, as if he did not notice that Yushu was late. Situ Qinglan saw Yushu and winked at her, indicating that she should leave an empty space for her. Yushu hurriedly bent over and sat down. "Did you bring the book?" Situ Qinglan asked in a low voice. Yushu nodded and put down the bookcase that was slung over her shoulder. She took out a book called The Complete Records of Qi Men Dun Jia Tong Zong, and carefully listened to Fang Zijing's explanation. Ah. Yushu turned around and saw Situ Qinglan staring at her wrist in surprise. Yushu looked down and found that her sleeve had slipped up when she took the book, revealing the bracelet on her left wrist. The transparent topaz bead was shining with a layer of light, like a ball of morning light. It lit up half of her wrist. No wonder it attracted Situ Qinglan's attention. Situ Qinglan hurriedly looked away and smiled apologetically at Yushu. Yushu also smiled back and quietly put down her sleeve to cover the ball in her hand. It was not until the morning class was over that Situ Qinglan couldn't help but grab Yushu's hand and ask curiously and shyly, "What's that on your hand? It's so beautiful." Yushu generously raised her hand for her to see and said, "It's a crystal." "Water essence?" Situ Qinglan held her hand and looked at it carefully. She shook her head and said, "It doesn't look like it." Situ Qinglan had been raised by the Dai master Fang Zijing since she was a child. She had seen many worldly things. But in her mind, the water essence, no matter how smooth it was polished, was just an ordinary gem. How could it be compared to the string of water essence on Yushu's hand? It looked so delicate, as if it had been dyed with water. Yushu raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, "It doesn't look like it. You are talking about the water essence and I am talking about the ice crystal." Saying this, she took down the string of topaz and showed it to Situ Qinglan. She was not afraid that Situ Qinglan would find it strange. Sometimes it was better to be in the open than to be in the dark. Situ Qinglan held the string of crystal and keenly felt a trace of coldness in her palm. She held it gently and couldn't help praising, "It's good stuff. Where did you buy it? I have never seen anyone wear it." Yushu curled up the corner of her mouth and said proudly, "It's the first one in the whole Enling city and it's in my hand. Of course you have never seen anyone wear it." It was not that she liked to show off. If she wanted to make a fortune with this thing in the future, she had to advertise it first. According to her observation, Situ Qinglan was a smooth and slick person in the Taisher library. She was well-informed and inquisitive. What she said just now might be spread to many people tomorrow. Sure enough, hearing Yushu's tone, Situ Qinglan was surprised again. She felt that the bead necklace in her hand was a little heavier. She hurriedly handed it back to Yushu and watched her put it on her wrist again. She said with some envy, "I have a Hanyang bracelet. It will be cold no matter how long I wear it in summer. But it is not as beautiful as your crystal." Few girls could resist shiny jewelry, and Situ Qinglan was no exception. Unfortunately, she lived under someone else's roof and didn't have much money. Hearing Yushu's tone, she thought that the crystal was as priceless as her family's Hanyang bracelet. So she didn't ask Yushu about it again. Yushu also knew a little about Situ Qinglan's family background. Seeing her sad eyes, she felt a little sorry. She thought that when she got the finished product from old Sue, she would choose a nice pendant for her. Because they had to go back to the women's dormitory to get their books, they went out together. Yushu lived in the east courtyard, and Situ Qinglan lived in the central courtyard. They said goodbye to each other when they entered the women's dormitory. Yushu stood at the door of the room and stared at the locked door of the next room on her right for a while. Then she shook her head and went into the room. She checked the doors and windows and then opened the window to let some air in. Then she walked around the room and found nothing. Lotus room? There was a knock on the door. It was Situ Qinglan who put down her book and came to find her. Yushu invited her in. Situ Qinglan put down the tea tray in her hand on the empty table. "I know you haven't come back often. There must be a lack of tea in the room. This is the fragrant slice I made this morning. It's soaked with flower dew and rock sugar. You can try it if you like." Yushu thanked her. She picked up an empty cup and drank by herself. She praised, "It's delicious. I like this kind of sweet tea. I also have a few kinds of fragrant slices. They taste good. I'll bring some for you next time." Since Shui Rui found out that she didn't like bitter tea, he would pack some new flower tea and fruit tea for her from time to time. The day before yesterday, he sent Lao Chue to bring her a pot of flowers and a box of fragrant slices of magnolia. She hadn't had time to taste it yet. Situ Qinglan smiled and said, "We have the same taste. If you can praise it, it must be good. I'll be waiting. Don't forget to bring it for me." Yushu nodded. Situ Qinglan chatted for a while, and then they talked about the ancestral worshipping ceremony. "I heard that the 6 of you made trouble the day before the sacrifice day. Are you okay?" Situ Qinglan asked with concern. Yushu looked at her with a smile and said, "If you want to know the truth, just ask. Don't beat around the bush." Situ Qinglan blushed a little. "I'm just a little curious. Tell me about it. There was a mess. Do you know Zhan Shuiyuan? That's her. Her family's Tianyu was lost. She blamed me for it. In the end, an interrogator came and asked about it. It turned out that the young lady of the Chui family, Chui Yun, stole Zhan Shuiyuan's stone. She said that she accidentally dropped it into the lake. She was afraid that people would blame her, so she framed me. Lord Wang said that he would report to the Celestial Commissioner when he came back from the worshipping ceremony. Yushu didn't know if he reported it after he came back. But she didn't hear anything about it in the library recently. Zhan Shuiyuan and Chui Yin must have found a way to hide it. No wonder Sidu Qinglan asked her. Yushu didn't tell her in detail. She didn't even mention Shui Rui's name. She just talked about it. She didn't mention that Zhan Shuiyuan and Chui Yin owed her 10 slaps. Situ Qinglan listened and frowned. She said, "What a mess. Fortunately it wasn't serious. Otherwise it would be a waste of time. If His Majesty blamed us, our future would be ruined." Yushu smiled bitterly. "Just because you asked that I told you. Look, I haven't heard anything from the Celestial Commissioner since we came back from the worshipping ceremony. I guess it's going to be left unsettled." Sidu Qinglan sighed. She also thought that this matter was going to be over. Seeing Yushu's bitter smile, she couldn't help but comfort her. The Zhan family has a strong foundation in Jiangxi. It's a taboo. Even the local yamen and military government have to rely on them. Let me tell you a secret. The young lady of the Zhan family came to the capital to study this time. It's most likely that she's going to marry into a noble family. What happened in Huajin Garden will be spread to the higher-ups. Naturally, there will be people who will help her suppress it. Fortunately, she found out that you didn't steal her family jewels. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll have to suffer in silence. Hearing this news, Yushu's eyes flickered. She was quiet for a moment and said, "Forget about Zhan Shuiyuan. What's Chui Yun relying on? Isn't she a daughter of a concubine? She was so arrogant in Huajin Garden." Situ Qinglan was a little surprised. She chuckled and said, "Chui Yun is nothing. But she has an elder sister named Chui Xen. She's 1 year younger than me. She got a chance when she was young and was accepted by Princess Xiang as her adopted daughter. She was raised with Commandery Princess Shiwen for 2 years. She calls Prince Xiang's heir brother and Commandery Princess Shiwen calls her elder sister. So she's half a master." Yushu narrowed her eyes and sneered in her heart. She knew that Chui Yun had no grudge against her. Why did she set her up? It turned out that there was such a relationship. Good job, Commandery Princess Shiwen. It turned out that this was the problem. Situ Qinglan saw that Yushu didn't speak. She thought she was uncomfortable, so she told her considerately, "Lotus Room, don't worry. I'll tell you a piece of good news. According to my grandfather's tone, the Celestial Commissioner is looking for some vacancies when he left his post at the beginning of the year. Among them there are 2 positions for female officials. There's a 7th grade Zanji position in the Imperial Historian's Library. You're a female fortune teller who only appears once in 10 years. Maybe you'll be able to become an official in advance this time." It was the second time for Yushu to hear Sidu Qinglan telling her about a good thing. The last time was the selection of people in the ancestral worship ceremony. Sidu Qinglan told her that she was selected, but she was rejected again in Rongxing Hall. Disapproving in her heart, Yushu still pretended to be curious. "Didn't they say there were 2 positions? What's the other one?" Situ Qinglan pursed her lips and said, "I don't dare to think about the other position. It's the Imperial Lady of Kunling Bureau. She's a 5th grade Zan. She's in charge of the marriage certificate and destiny of the aristocratic families. Such an important position is like a delicious cake. They're all promoted from the Celestial Commissioner. It's not our Imperial Historian's Library's turn to choose." Yushu didn't care. She smiled and turned away. She chatted with Sidu Qinglan for a while and then sent her out. She didn't stay in the Imperial Historian's Library. She packed up and left. When she went out of the gate, she saw the carriage under the south wall was already there. Lu Zhong. Yushu looked at the sweat on her coachman's shoulder and scolded him lightly, "Didn't I ask you to stay an hour at night? It's such a hot day." Lu Zhong smiled and said, "I'm afraid that you'll wait too long. Get in the carriage. I've prepared herbal tea for you. Be punctual next time." Yushu said the man again before climbing into the carriage. "Are you going home or going somewhere?" Chapter 474. Updated. It has been 10 days since Yushu came to get the beads last time. Old Su and 2 apprentices have made 1/3 of the crystal material that Yushu left here. This time, in addition to 80 beads, there are also several delicate and small pendants, which are all the styles chosen by Yushu before. The only difference is that there are no duplicates. The plain ones had crystal gourds and peaches, while the elegant ones had lotus flowers and banana leaves. Among them, the one that caught Yushu's eyes the most was a small purple crystal fan. She played with it for a long time. Before leaving, Yushu asks Old Su about which jewelry shop in the city has a good reputation. After walking out of Old Man Su's workshop, Yushu puts back the topaz bracelet that has changed a lot. It's good that Yushu is narrow-minded. She hasn't known Old Man Su for long, so she has to be careful. Yushu doesn't go home for lunch at noon. She goes to Wangji Building and washes the crystal products she just got. She puts half of them into the windy pool and fishes out the remaining 40 beads. The pink and purple crystal beads weren't as bright as the yellow and white crystal beads, but they shone brightly, giving off an alluring vibe. Yushu asks Xiaoqing to string 2 more bracelets. In case that the Reiki will leak out, she puts them in sandalwood boxes and keeps them in the shade. In the afternoon, Yushu goes to the gold chisel shop mentioned by Old Su and orders a few thin chains. Then she goes to the antique street in the east of the city. She goes to several shops selling fans, but she is disappointed. That's right, she originally wanted to use the 100-year-old peach tree root to make a folding fan for Shui Rue to carry around. It was both beautiful and practical, and most importantly, it could ward off evil and eliminate Yin, making it convenient for him to move around the prison. However, she asked several craftsmen today, and they all say that the peach root is not as good as peach wood. It is not suitable to make fan bones because it is easy to crack. There was one shop that said she could apply glue to prevent it from cracking, but because she hadn't done it before, the shop owner didn't care if she broke it and didn't want to pay for it, which made her stop. It was a small waste, but she was afraid that if she ruined that piece of peach wood, it would be difficult to find another one. In a flash, it was already evening. She went home resentfully. She almost forgot that tomorrow was Xen Lu's birthday and she was going to Xian's mansion as a guest. On the 16th of the 5th month, Yushu woke up in the morning to freshen up and change into a new set of clothes. She had Yun Do twist her hair into a proper hairstyle and wore the new set of jewelry that Zhao Hui had made for her. Her dressing was not as casual as usual. Today is Xen Lu's coming-of-age day. The invitation card given to her is sent to relatives and friends. At that time they may have to eat together. If she still wears green clothes and cloth shoes, it will be troublesome. Zhao Hui was surprised to see Yushu dressed up for breakfast. She wondered, what's the occasion today? It's rare to see you dressed up so neatly. Only then did Yushu say that she was going to attend the hairpin ceremony of the female students in Taisha Shu Garden. She took out the invitation card and showed it to her. As soon as she saw the gilded invitation card, she knew it was from a rich family. Zhao Hui anxiously slapped her leg and said, "Child, why didn't you tell me earlier that you prepared a gift?" Yushu honestly said that she only prepared one gift. "I am going alone. Can't I prepare 2 or 3 gifts for her? She is so happy." Zhao Hui didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Where did this stingy girl come from? Go quickly and take 2 pieces of good satin from the warehouse. There is also an old jade hairpin in my dowry. Send it to add to my hair. If you really go empty-handed, you will be laughed at behind my back. Yushu couldn't refuse Zhao Hui's idea. She had no choice but to take Yun Do to pick up 2 pieces of good makeup satin. Because she did a good deed during the Double Sun Society, Lu Tang gave it as a reward. The things were not bad. Xian's mansion was located in the west of the city. As one of the 12 families, it was one of the best. The Xian's mansion was extraordinarily built. Other people had 2 stone lions squatting in front of their house, but their mansion had a white jade paishio in front of their house. They were not afraid that someone would secretly chisel it. Yushu arrived at 9 o'clock. There were not many carriages and horses outside. Because she had the title of fortune teller, she walked through the front door. Immediately, a steward took away the book and called a maid to lead her in. Although this family was a branch of the Xian family, it was the most prestigious. Now 4 generations lived under the same roof and lived in a big mansion. On the surface, it seemed to be more harmonious than other families. Yushu was directly taken to the door of Xen Lu's room. After listening to the maid's report, someone opened the bamboo curtain on the other side of the door. She heard laughter inside. Alas, in the blink of an eye, you have reached the age of marriage. Time really makes people grow old. You are not as young as before. Ba, today is my good day. 5th brother, if you talk nonsense again, I will go back and tell first uncle and ask you to copy books in the ancestral hall. Well, I was wondering why father scolded me last time and punished me to copy Tao Te Ching for half a month. It turned out that you were the ghost. Ah, don't scratch me. Second sister, third sister, save me. My clothes are ruined. Yushu lifted her leg and walked in. She looked through the door and saw the sunlight shining everywhere. On the orange-red Persian carpet, there was a bronze mirror that was half the height of a person. A group of young men and women with bright colors surrounded a petite girl in plain clothes and were playing. Ha ha ha. Lotus Room, you are here. As soon as Xan Lu saw Yushu, he pushed away fifth brother Xan who was kissing her neck and threw himself on Yushu's back to hide. Seeing that there was an outsider, the group of people put away their playfulness and smiled at Yushu seriously. Standing among the group of women, there was only one young man with a white face and no beard. He was extremely handsome. He looked at Xan Lu behind Yushu with a smile and his eyes were doting. Then it was time to recognize people. As Yushu expected, that handsome young man was Xan Lu's fifth cousin, Xan Yingguang, who was often mentioned by Xan Lu. In addition to a few Xan sisters, there were 2 or 3 close friends of Xan Lu. They were about the same age but they were not children of Yi Shui. However, they had heard of the reputation of Yushu, the female fortune-teller. Not knowing how Xan Lu boasted about her, 2 of the girls' eyes lit up when they saw Yushu. The remaining one looked at Yushu shyly, but her eyes showed that she knew her. When Yushu saw this person, she was very surprised. She didn't expect that she and Xan Lu were best friends. Well, you sisters stay and talk for a while. We will go and see how the preparation outside is going. Second sister Xan took her younger brother and sister away, leaving Xan Lu and the other 4. Yushu looked at the girl she knew. She wasn't sure if the girl was willing to recognize her, so she didn't say anything. Unexpectedly, the girl stepped forward and took her hand saying, "Sister Yu, how have you been recently? I heard from father that you went to the Imperial Mausoleum to worship the ancestors a while ago." Nodding her head, Yushu smiled and said, "Is your father and mother doing well?" Qiu Yueling said, "They are good. Mother has been talking about inviting you to our home." Do you know who this person is? She is the daughter of Qiu Jiming, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Works, who is helping Yushu repair the residence. She is the one who pretended to be crazy in order to escape the marriage. Seeing them talk, Xan Lu curiously asked, "When did you guys meet?" Qiu Yueling rushed to answer, "Didn't I get seriously ill a while ago? Everyone said that the feng shui of my home isn't good, so my father invited Sister Yu over to take care of me." Chapter 475. Before the auspicious hour arrived, several of Xan Lu's sisters each took out their personal gifts and showed up. The young lady of Master Zhao of Honglu Temple presented a paper-thin shell made of conch shell, saying that it was a foreign item. The daughter of Grand Scholar Ning of Wuying Hall presented a box of rare snow pear incense. Qiu Yueling's gift was much more appropriate, a set of tricolored rhinoceros horn combs with auspicious meaning. Xan Lu's dressing table was also piled with many gifts. Some were given by her family and some were just received. They were all valuable. She beamed with joy as she fiddled with them. Her eyes turned to Yushu. She stretched out her hand and said, "What about you? Don't try to fool me. I remember you said you would give me something good last time. What can I do if I don't give it now?" Yushu patted her palm. Without waiting for Xan Lu to pout, she took out an old sandalwood box from her waist pocket and put it back in her hand. Xan Lu couldn't wait to open it. When she saw a ball of white light, she was stunned. She immediately exclaimed. The girls who were standing on both sides came closer. They thought it was something good. They were surprised to see Xan Lu carefully pick up a string of water beads. It was so dazzling. They blinked a few times and looked at it again. It was not water beads. It was obviously a kind of unknown gemstone. It was polished to a smooth and attractive surface. It was really better than jade. For a moment, the girls couldn't move their eyes away. They could only see Xan Lu happily put the white crystal bracelet on her wrist. Her originally white skin seemed to be shining. "Ah, what kind of jade is this?" Qiu Yueling asked curiously. They were all daughters of official families. Their families were wealthy. They could see any gemstone or jade. But they couldn't tell the origin of this bracelet. Yushu saw that Xan Lu was also looking at her eagerly, so she explained with a smile, "This is a crystal stone. A few days ago I got a few pieces, so I tried to make them look like it. I also used feng shui to raise it for a few days. It's not only beautiful to wear but also useful. The one Fei Fei is wearing is a white crystal which can calm the nerves and nourish the brain and help you sleep. Here I have a string of topaz in my hand. As she spoke, she pulled up her sleeves and revealed the string of topaz she wore on her wrist, causing a few more gasps of surprise. Immediately, her wrist was grabbed by the fearless people and they all started to appraise it. This is great. This crystal feels cool to the touch, as if it had just been taken out of the water. Older sister Yu, did you also use feng shui to raise this topaz? Although they were envious of Yu Shu for gifting Xan Lu a crystal bracelet, none of them asked about it. Yu Shu didn't talk about the benefits of the crystal. She only told them that this thing was made by her, and now only 2 people got it. One was in her hand, and the other was given to Xan Lu. Xan Lu was naturally very satisfied, and the way he looked at Yu Shu became much more affectionate. If it weren't for the fact that there were people around, he would have probably hugged Yu Shu's neck and kissed her. Later, when Mrs. Xan came to see her little daughter with her maid, Xan Lu held her hand and acted like a spoiled child. Mother, look, the bracelet given to me by the Lotus Mother. Isn't it beautiful? I will wear it when I bow later, okay? Mrs. Xan also saw the crystal beads in her hand. She was surprised, but she didn't lose her composure at all. She didn't ask questions like a little girl, but thanked Yu Shu on her behalf. Then she touched Xan Lu's head and agreed. Originally, before the hairpin ceremony, people must wear no makeup, so they couldn't wear any hairpin or ring. Bracelets and beads were not a big deal. When the auspicious time was coming, Mrs. Xan invited Yu Shu and other young ladies to the hall, leaving Mrs. Xan and her daughter to talk to each other. Among the 4 branches of the Xan family, except for an old man who retired and lived in seclusion, the head of the family was Xan Lu's grandfather, Xan Yen. He was the left judge of the Celestial Commissioner, a 4th-rank official. Among the 4 sons of Xan Yen, only the second master was born by the wife of the main wife. As the daughter of the second branch, Xan Lu ranked 6th among all the sisters, but she was the most delicate girl of her generation. The hairpin ceremony was very grand. The hall was full of 200 people. Most of the guests were famous madams and madams. There were even 2 commandery princesses who came to join in the fun and sat at the VIP table. Yu Shu was arranged to sit at the side of relatives and friends. She sat with Mrs. Xan and Qiu Yueling to watch the ceremony. She glanced around and saw many familiar people. For example, Commandery Princess Shiwen, who was sitting at the VIP table and laughing with others. Yu Shu's eyes stayed for a moment and then moved away. But no one knew what she was thinking. When the auspicious time came, there was a sound of playing in the music hall. Xan Lu was helped out by an older woman of the family. She wore a plain long dress and her black hair draped over her back. Her back was straight and she was a little nervous. The Xan family invited the secretary of the Ministry of Rites. All the etiquette was done. When it was time to comb her hair and put on her clothes, she inadvertently raised her hand to show her wrist. The crystal clear bracelet was particularly eye-catching. Almost all of the women present noticed this. Seeing this, Yu Shu snickered in her heart. Xan Lu had unintentionally done her a great favor. Now she just needed to wait quietly. Wait for Xan Lu to discover the benefits of this white crystal bracelet. Wait for these women to inquire about it. She was not afraid of not being able to bid for it. After the ceremony there was a banquet. Yu Shu didn't wait for people to leave and left first. Seeing that Yu Shu was leaving, Qiu Yueling followed. Sister Yu. Yu Shu was called by Qiu Yueling in a corner of the garden. She turned her head and saw her running in front of her. Thank you for helping me hide it. Qiu Yueling blushed and twisted the corner of her clothes. She was very grateful to Yu Shu for helping her avoid that unhappy marriage. Yu Shu was more careful than her. She looked left and right to make sure no one was passing by. Then she said softly, I said you don't need to thank me. Your father loves you wholeheartedly. I will let go of what happened last time, but don't do stupid things again. Qiu Yueling was ashamed but also glad. Although she lied to her parents, it was a blessing in disguise. Her family didn't force her to get married anymore. Mother wants to invite sister to our house for tea. When are you free? Yu Shu thought for a moment. How about the morning after tomorrow? Qiu Yueling said happily, that's good. I will go back and tell mother to wait for sister to come. Yu Shu agreed and said goodbye to her. She went out on foot to find Lu Zhong on the street. Then she got on the car and went to the north of the city to find a fan shop. However, she spent the whole afternoon in vain. The next day, Fang Zijing's magic class was held every 7 days. Yu Shu came early today. As soon as she entered Shushui Tang, she was pulled out by Situ Qinglan. What's wrong? What do you mean? Situ Qinglan stamped her feet and said, I told you the day before yesterday that the position of the 7th grade Zanji of the Celestial Commissioner was taken by Miss Zhan. Yushu was stunned. You mean Zhan Shuiyuan? Isn't it her? Yesterday the Imperial Astronomer sent someone to deliver the letter. You weren't around so you didn't see the scene. There were a few other outstanding female students who heard the news and their mouths were twisted in anger. I thought that this opportunity should have been yours. No matter who, it shouldn't have been her. Situ Qinglan was not convinced, but it was reasonable. Among the female students in the Taisha library in terms of level, there was Yu Shu, a female fortune-teller who rarely appeared in 10 years. In terms of family background, there were 12 aristocratic families in the capital. But Zhan Shuiyuan was just a 9th grade Master Yi, and she was from a foreign aristocratic family. Who would have thought that she would be taken advantage of? Yu Shu frowned and said, "Who knows, there is something strange about it." Zhan Shuiyuan became a female official, which was not good news for her. What do you think this Zanji is in charge of? She only knew who the senior officer of the Celestial Commissioner was, and there were 5 senior officers. Let's talk over there. Situ Qinglan and Yu Shu sat on the horizontal railing by the pond. I think you are not very clear about the internal structure of the Celestial Commissioner, so I will tell you. The Celestial Commissioner has 3 departments and 2 bureaus. The 3 departments are the Department of Clan Affairs, the Department of Taiching, and the Department of Accounting. You have participated in the Dian, so you should know about the Department of Taiching. It handles all the matters of the Dian test. All masters of E below the 5th grade are recorded and printed by the Department of E. The Department of E is also in charge of the names of the descendants of the various aristocratic families of E. The Department of Clan Affairs is even more impressive. It is in charge of the entry and exit of the royal family, the rewards and punishments of nobility, and the time and month of worship. The Department of Accounting is easy to manage. All the trading houses, no matter big or small, have to pay taxes every year. As for my property and salary, it is also distributed by the Department of Accounting. Yushu listened and took notes at the same time. She asked, "What about the Kunling Bureau? What is it in charge of?" Situ Qinglan's eyes flashed and she said slowly, "The Kunling Bureau is specially set up for women. It is in charge of the bedroom of the concubines and checks the fate of the nobles. Its power is not great, but it is not trivial. Let's not talk about the Forbidden Palace for now. Think about it, it is better to be a daughter of a noble family than to marry. Sometimes, if the fate is good, it is said that it will bring prosperity to the husband and the family, and the person will be more valuable. Sometimes, if the fate is bad, it is said that it is not good for the family and the person will be lower. When talking about marriage, which family does not carefully flatter the Kunling Bureau?" Yushu was shocked. Only now did she realize that the power of the Celestial Commissioner was so vast. As for the Kunling Bureau, the fate was really a vital point of the noble families. This reminded her of the time when Zhao Hui was approved by the Ji family's trading house to be a widow. Her family's wealth was stolen and she was reduced to the streets. Yushu's emotions fluctuated. She asked again, "What do you think the 7th grade Zanji is in charge of?" Situ Qinglan's expression was a little strange. It is the subordinate of the Taiching Bureau. The so-called Zanji is somewhat similar to the registrar. It is more popular than other places because it is in charge of collecting the residence cards of the big and small masters of E in the court. What was a residence card? It was a private file that recorded a person's birth date, birthplace, clan, relatives, and other important things about him. In other words, this Zanji could check the personal information of a master of E at will. Yushu had a slight headache. She could imagine that after Zhan Shuiyuan took office, he would definitely pull out her residence card and check it. Maybe he would hand it to someone else. Although she did not do anything shameful, it would be uncomfortable to be exposed. "Thank you for telling me this." Yushu stood up and patted the wrinkles of her skirt. She said to Situ Qinglan, "No wonder so many people want to become an official in the Celestial Commissioner. I understand now." Chapter 476. Updated, she knows that Zhan Shuiyuan made up the story of the 7th grade Celestial Commissioner. Yushu is just depressed for one morning and then she lets it go. She copies books after class as usual. She goes home for lunch at noon and goes out to shop in the afternoon to find the skill of making fans. Yushu is a little stubborn. She wants to make a fan for Shui Rue with the century-old peach root, so she doesn't think about anything else. In fact, if Shui Rue knows that she goes out on such a hot day for him, he will be happy to take that piece of wood directly. She comes back in the evening and goes back empty-handed again. Yushu is not depressed. She calculates Shui Rui's birthday. It will be July. There is enough time. She is busy with chores during the day. At night, Yushu concentrates on studying her law of time of calamity and is not disturbed by external things. The next day, Yushu doesn't need to go to the book garden. In the morning she takes the century-old peach route to Wangji Tower. It happens that Xia Jiangying has a letter for her with a hand-copied copy of Chess Spirit Scripture. Yushu mentioned Situ Qinglan in a letter and complained about the aristocratic families. Unexpectedly she cares about it and makes a copy for Yushu. Sitting in the room, a maid is fanning her. Yushu takes off her coat and lies on the short couch in the study to read the letter. Not long ago Ji Xingxuan died in prison. Yushu sends the news to Xia Jiangying guest house as soon as possible, so that Xia Jiangying knows that Ji Xingxuan is gone. She can put down the knot in her heart and wait for her marriage peacefully. As for the inside story, it is related to Shui Rui the executor, so Yushu doesn't reveal anything. The content of Xia Jiangying's letter is mostly chatting. It is inevitable that she feels a little lonely. In the end, she even mentions a bracelet worn by the 6th Miss of the Xan family at her hairpin ceremony. Yesterday, a new friend came to visit. I heard that the 6th Madam of the Xan family of the 12 prefectures got a string of strange stones on her hairpin ceremony. It shines in the daytime and is as pure as jade. I know you are good friends with her. Can you find out what it is? Yushu laughed involuntarily. Women would always be women. It was fine even if they stayed at home, but they just had to listen to these clothes and jewelry. The news spread really fast. In just 2 days, even Xia Jiangying had heard about it. After asking Xiaoqing to grind the ink, Yushu picked up the brush and wrote a reply letter. After much deliberation, she still wrote about the encounter between Lu Tan and the others in Huajin Garden. She didn't make any unnecessary comments. If Xia Jiangying could understand it, then it would be considered as a reminder to let her know how sinister the royal family was. If she couldn't, then it wouldn't be bad for her to know more about Lu Tan. Finally, she asked Xiaodai to take out the 2 crystal bracelets she put away the day before yesterday from the cabinet. After thinking for a while, she takes the purple one and asks Xiaoqing to send it together with the letter. According to the etiquette, ordinary people are forbidden to wear purple. Only princes and nobles are qualified to wear purple. However, Xia Jiangying is going to be a princess soon, so it doesn't matter. After writing the letter, Lin Fu is talking outside. "Miss, I have something to report." Yushu lets him into the small study. She drinks the half-cold magnolia fragrant slice and listens to him. The day before yesterday, a group of guests came to the restaurant. There are 8 or 9 people. They seem to be students of Taisher Library. There are both men and women. They booked a private room in the front building and Guiba is serving the dishes. According to their conversation, there is actually a Miss surnamed Zhan among them who has become a female celestial commissioner. So she is the host to celebrate. Because they mentioned you, Guiba is outside the door and listened for a while. Yushu raises her eyebrows. "What did they say about me? Tell me." Lin Fu lowered his eyebrows and said submissively, "They said that Mrs. Conduct was improper and that you seem to have stolen something from that Miss Zhan. Later on you were found. They also said that Miss relied on a mistress in the palace to be so arrogant. Your hands and feet in the imperial garden were not clean, but no one dared to investigate." Hearing this, Yushu was so angry that she almost flipped over. She thought to herself, "What a pair of dogs." After calming down, she confirms with Lin Fu, "Is there a Miss surnamed Chui who is called Yunyun?" Lin Fu says yes. Yushu takes a sip of tea to cool down her anger. She squints her eyes and asks Lin Fu, "You heard them talk behind my back. Didn't you charge them a few more taels of silver?" Lin Fu lowers his head and whispers, "It's not much. There were many guests the night before yesterday. There was no demand for fish ingredients, so I made the decision to increase the price. I charged them 300 taels of silver for a table of food and wine. In Forgotten Machine Building, 300 taels of silver for a table of food isn't the most expensive standard. But for a few students who have nothing to do, this amount of money is just right. It's enough for them to take out, but it's also painful." Yushu smiles happily and waves her hand. "Well done. I will charge you an extra month's salary. Put it on my account." Lin Fu retreats and continues to work in the front. Yushu thinks for a while. She takes the fan from Xiaoqing and shakes it a few times. She stands up and says, "I'm sweating. Go and prepare some warm water. I'll take a bath." The 2 maids go out. Outside the door, Xiaodai pulls Xiaoqing and whispers, "Do you think Miss will take other people's things?" Xiao Qing rolls her eyes and asks her, "What do you think?" Xiao Dai shakes her head, "I don't think so. She must be framed by others." Xiao Qing snickers and whispers in her ear, "You're smart. If Miss really wants something, she doesn't need to take other people's things. She can just tell the young master. Why can't she give the treasures?" But when did Miss ask the young master for anything? Next time, don't ask silly questions. Be careful and make Miss angry. Xiao Dai quickly covers her mouth and nods. On the other hand, Yushu carries the peach root to the balcony. She measures the position of the wind pond and chooses an empty door next to the fish tank that doesn't affect the layout. The wind pond is useful to the crystal. She doesn't know what changes will happen to this peach root. She will come back to observe in a few days. After taking a bath, Yushu sits in a cool corner of the courtyard. She eats a watermelon while thinking about how to find a chance to slap Zhang Shuiyuan and Cui Yun's mouth. She wants them to know that they shouldn't gossip about her. As for Princess Xiwen, she will remember it first and teach her a lesson in the future. Puff puff, she spits out 3 melon seeds. Yushu puts the melon skin on the plate and picks up another piece. Then she listens to Xiao Qing's persuasion. "Miss, it's going to be lunch soon. Eat less cold food or your stomach will hurt." Yushu is a little hungry. She puts down the melon and says, "Then let's prepare lunch. Just cook 2 dishes. Don't make too much and you won't be able to eat it." After returning from Huajin Garden, Yushu eats at Wangji restaurant for the first time. The cook made a special stove for her and 2 of her favorite dishes are cooked very well. Yushu sits alone at the table. The first few mouthfuls are delicious, but after that she gradually feels that the food is bland. It's the same dishes, but there's 1 less pair of chopsticks and 1 less person to pick food for her. Her appetite is gone for no reason. After returning to the capital and not seeing each other for 6 or 7 days, Yushu misses Shui Rui for the first time. She holds the chopsticks and is slightly distracted. She doesn't know what that person is busy with. Chapter 477. In the end, Yushu didn't go to visit Shui Rui. After lunch, she suddenly remembered that she promised Chiu Yueling the day before yesterday that she would visit the assistant minister's mansion, so she ordered the kitchen to prepare a box of fruit pastries to accompany her. When she arrived at the Chiu's mansion, a maid from the inner courtyard came out to greet Yushu as soon as she entered the second gate. Hearing the servant's report, Mrs. Chiu put down the account book in her hand. She asked the old maid beside her to prepare tea and fruits and asked someone to call Miss Chiu. When Yushu met the mother and daughter of the Chiu family, they were very polite to each other. "I was delayed by something in the morning. I didn't disturb Madam's lunch, did I? It's good that you can come." Yushu guessed that Mrs. Chiu must have something to say since she invited her to visit the mansion several times. Sure enough, after Chiu Yueling showed up and said a few words, Mrs. Chiu sent her back to her room to do needlework. Madame Chiu then got straight to the point. "My daughter's marriage had some problems before, but fortunately Mr. was able to see through the marriage calamity, so a disaster was avoided. We shouldn't have mentioned this matter so soon, but my daughter will be 17 in 2 months. Master and I have discussed that we should arrange a suitable marriage for her, so that there won't be people gossiping outside and delaying Yunyang. Therefore, I invited Mr. here today to ask you to take a look at her horoscope, so as to prevent any more mistakes. I have several suitable candidates here and I hope Mr. can help me. After this matter is settled, I will definitely thank you." Talking about marriage was a private matter. Mrs. Chiu could talk to Yushu so openly not because she was stupid. On the contrary, it was because when Chiu Yueling got crazy, and Yushu saw her family's dirty linen, she panicked for a long time, but no unfavorable rumors were spread, so she believed in Yushu's character. Yushu thinks of another story. It turns out that the family that the Chiu family wanted to marry was one of the 12 aristocratic families in the capital. Later, no matter what, the marriage broke down. The other side would certainly be unhappy. So Madame Chiu didn't dare to send the 8 characters Gung invitation to the Dai exchange house for fortune-telling. Then she remembered that she had no background. Yushu said with a smile, "There is no need for Furin to be so courteous. Chiu Darren is still kind enough to help me supervise the repair of the residence. There is no need to thank me for such a small matter." She wasn't good at reading people's fates, but someone else was. Seeing that Yushu readily agreed, Madame Chiu happily ordered her personal maid to take out several cards from her collection and hand them over to Yushu. Yushu took the papers and flipped them over. She laughed in her heart. This Madame Chiu has really cast a wide net. Unexpectedly, she has chosen 5 or 6 families' young masters. But I have to remind you that you can't tell anyone about this. Madame Chiu was still a bit worried. Yushu closed the cards and nodded. She said, "Furin, wait for my reply." Madame Chiu was relieved. The smile on her face relaxed a lot. She stared at Yushu for a while and asked, "I heard from Yunyang that you gave a string of strange stones to Miss Xian's hairpin ceremony the other day. Is it called a crystal or something? I'm curious. Can I have a look?" Yushu raised her eyebrows. She directly raised her hand and took the string of sparkling topaz from her wrist. She gave it to the maid and showed it to Madame Chiu. After Madame Chiu saw it, she was not surprised. She praised it a few times. But when she saw Yushu's generous face, she remembered her daughter's coquettish behavior yesterday. She couldn't help but ask, "May I know where did you buy this kind of bead?" Yushu pretended to be proud and said, "To tell you the truth, the same kind of crystal is hard to find in the outside world. Didn't Miss Chiu tell Madame that I carefully raised this bracelet in my family's feng shui pond? It's so clean and bright. Although it's not as good as a beautiful jade, it can bring good luck to people. Look at me wearing this topaz. I picked up some silver a few days ago when I went out. The white crystal I gave to Xian Lu is good for calming the nerves. If you don't believe me, you can ask Miss Chiu to ask her if she's sleeping better than usual these days." Yushu had been in the insurance business in her previous life. She had seen countless sales tactics and knew how to attract people's interest. Madame Chiu became more and more surprised. She stroked the bead in her hand and found that the gemstone was still cool when taken off from Yushu's hand. It was really strange. When she came back to her senses, Madame Chiu realized that it was a bit rude of her to keep holding other people's valuables. She embarrassedly asked the maid to hand the bracelet back to Yushu. She smiled at her and said, "You must be joking. I love to collect these rare things. If you have more of these, you would rather give them to me. That would be great." As Yushu put on the bracelet, she shook her head and said, "I'm sorry to disappoint you, madam. I only have 3 of the same bracelets. One was given to the 6th daughter of the Xian family, and the other was taken by the 5th daughter of the Xia family." Madame Chiu's eyebrows jumped. Wasn't Miss Xia Jiang the one who was appointed to marry the 9th prince in the palace? Why did it sound like Yushu was very familiar with her? Although she was confused, she couldn't ask about Yushu's personal relationship. She could only suppress her doubts. At the same time, she felt it was a pity. No matter how good it was, she couldn't ask the other to give it to her. After Yushu finished showing off, she didn't have the mood to stay any longer. She put away the half-stack of calligraphy and got up to leave. Madame Chiu took the initiative to send her out of the second door. Only then did she order her personal maid to follow. When Madame Chiu returned to her room, she was pestered by Chiu Yueling. "Mother, how was it? Did you ask for me?" Chiu Yueling didn't know what Madame Chiu was planning to do with her marriage. She only cared about the crystal bracelet. Madame Chiu patted her lovingly and coaxed, "Sir, you only raised 3 such beads. One was given to the Xian family's girl, one was given to the future Princess Jing, and there aren't any more." Chiu Yueling gloomily said, "If I had known you Jejia earlier, then maybe she would have given me one." Chiu Furin was upset and reached out to pinch her. She lightly scolded, "Who did you learn to be so shallow? Mother has not kept good things for you. Wait until your father comes back and then I'll scold you." Chiu Yueling knew that she had said the wrong thing and quickly begged for forgiveness. Madame Chiu loved her daughter and scolded her a few more times. Yushu left the Chiu family and went to Xia Jiang's guest house. When Xia Jiangmin heard her arrive, she was in the middle of her afternoon nap. She immediately woke up and changed into the clothes she wore to greet guests. She hurried to the flower hall. It had been almost a month since they last met. Yushu felt that Xia Jiangmin had become even more beautiful. With her thick skin standing next to her, it was like a fresh flower matched with weeds. She had just teased her when she received a pay. "You still remember to come and see me. I wrote you to come and talk to me but you ignored me. I really don't know what you are busy with all day." Yushu held her soft hand and squeezed it, saying, "Who is as idle as you? All you do is eat and sleep at home and wait to get married." The young miss of the Yi Shui family was not like those from scholarly families. She did not do needlework and did not need to hide in her room to embroider pillows when she got married. Of course, she had nothing to do and lived like a pig. Xia Jiangmin was annoyed and gritted her teeth, saying, "How about I switch with you?" Yushu quickly covered her mouth and looked outside. She glared at her, saying, "What nonsense are you saying? If your father hears it, he will be afraid that I will lead you astray. If that happens, I won't even be able to close the door." Xia Jiangmin angrily pulled down her hand and pulled her outside. "It's hot here. Let's go sit in the pavilion by the lake." I will make tea for you. Why did you come here at this hour? Aren't you afraid of the sun? The afternoon sun is so hot. You are not white in the first place. If you burn another layer of skin. Yushu understood that Xia Jiangmin usually had no one to talk to, so she listened to her chatter. The two went to the lake, and the maids went to make tea to appease the mosquitoes. Of course, she had to mention the amethyst bracelet that Yushu asked someone to send yesterday. Xia Jiangmin intimately leaned against Yushu and played with the crystal bead on her wrist. She smiled sweetly and said, "When I got it yesterday, I was shocked. It turned out to be yours." Then she rolled her eyes and said angrily, "If I didn't mention it, you probably wouldn't remember me. You gave it to the sister of the Xian family first, and then you gave it to me. Why am I not as close to you as she is?" Yushu couldn't help laughing. With one hand held by her, she poured tea with the other. "If you compare like this, then I will say that it is more valuable to you than to her. Are you happy now?" Xia Jiangmin didn't think that purple was only suitable for her. She curled her lips into a satisfied smile and put down her sleeves. "Forget it this time. Next time if there's anything good, send it to me first." Yushu also liked her coquettish and cute personality, so she casually agreed and said, "I still have a few pendants. When they are well, I will give you two to play with." How can a few stones compare to a friendship that has been through life and death? After laughing, Yushu asked her, "The marriage appointment document has been issued for a month. Why hasn't the Celestial Commissioner chosen an auspicious date?" Xia Jiangmin said, "According to my father, he just chose it 2 days ago and is waiting for the emperor to approve. Didn't I tell you? My third uncle is on the way and will arrive in the capital in a few days." Although it was an imperial marriage, the customs couldn't be exempted. Xia Jiang's came from the south with 10 li of dowry. Yushu let out a sigh of relief for her and said, "That's good. After you get married, you don't need to be so restrained anymore. It's good to have some social interaction." These days, Yushu saw that the emperor had some taboos towards the rich and powerful families of these places. For example, Wen Qin and Xia Jiang's. Although they were the leaders of the north and south, they didn't even have a proper mansion in the capital. They had to live in another guest house. Xia Jiangmin was married to a prince. Before the wedding, she followed Xia Jiang's He Lang and didn't step out of the door. It was as if she was afraid that they would go out and hook up. Xia Jiangmin's eyes flashed and she snorted, "That's right, they're always so restrained. Even now, I don't know many people. If it wasn't for my father, forget it, let's not talk about this. Why did you come to find me today? I don't believe that you came to see me for no reason. Don't think that I don't know you." Yushu rubbed her nose, thinking that this girl had grown smarter. She took out a few name cards from her bosom. They were from Chiofuran. "This is the female's horoscope. These are the male's horoscope. Didn't I teach you the 6 lines? Combine them for me and write them down for me." When Yushu sent the future Jing Wang Fei, she didn't feel guilty at all. Xia Jiangmin looked suspiciously at the name on the paper and asked, "When did you change to being a matchmaker?" You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.